Welcome to Ape. Here we go. Oh man, that's great.
Jim, I had to unmute there. Well, I'm feeling very slighted now. I'm going to take my cookies and go home.
These random musical references are brought to you at no extra charge by Jim Bates
and Empire Records in Seattle, Washington. Oh my
I'm waiting
God!
For the Posse Speedos.
No.
I think Ian Bonner paid Josh to say that. I'm pretty sure, Zach, that's what happened.
That sounds like some money was exchanged across some state lines there.
There you go.
All right, time to bite off more than I can chew.
Dang, dude, you're hired.
Oh, wow.
Yay, I finally get a job.
This means he gets to read this next one too, right?
No, I'll do this one.
Notice how Jim took the section that had all just first names, not the last names.
There might have been a reason for that.
I noticed that.
Yeah.
Welcome to episode 80 of the Plastic Posse and an all-star cast of modelers and friends. As we were recording this episode, our friends TJ, JB, and Jensen are in the Netherlands at SMC. They're also there with Sam and Chris Meddings and a whole bunch of other great people. And our good friend Doug is continuously chasing the eclipse across the southern part of the country right now, so good luck to him. So Scott and I decided to invite a bunch of posse buddies in for recording number 80. But these are the only guys that we can get to show up. Joining us today are Jim Bates. Jim, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. This definitely is the B team.
Well, yeah, you do have me and Scott too, so that
Is it B for Bates?
It is B for Bates. If you have a crime, or I don't even remember the A-team intro, but if you can find us, maybe you don't want to hire the B team.
Sad thing about it is we just had the Jim Bates chair cleaned. Now we got to have it cleaned again.
Oh, crap. All right. I'll behave.
And from the propaganda channel, we have the AK Interactive legend of all trades. Let's not forget Mr. Rick Lawler. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for that introduction. And yeah, this is not even the B team. It's certainly the C team here. I don't know what's going on here, guys.
From Utah, we have Josh Buck. How you doing, Josh?
Good. How you guys doing?
Great. And all the way from Tennessee, we've got Zach Grizzle. How you doing, Zach?
I'm doing pretty good. Also, I'd like to petition we rename this the Z team. Because I think A, that's where we rank, and me.
That's a good one. I like that one.
Very nice. Also joining us for this episode is Gary Baker. You'll hear an interview with Gary that Grant and I did. He's a very talented figure painter, and we look forward to spending some time with him at MMSI.
All right, let's talk about a few things that we've all been involved in the last couple of weeks. I'm going to start off first. I went to a really cool model show a couple of weeks ago, Orange Con in Orange County, California. Was lucky enough to get a sit down with Fred and George from Tamiya and take a really close look at the new F-35B that's coming out in 148 scale. And I tell you, people, I posted pictures of it, and they don't do it justice. The fan on top actually looks like a photo etch part to me. I mean, it's really a great build. It's going to be a great model. It's going to be really classic. They also have the 148 scale ambulance out now, which was another nice build. They had some of their combination kits. They have a 262, I believe, with a Kettenkrad. They have a British Spitfire with an Austin. They also have a French fighter with the Citron and a couple other vehicles in 148 scale planes and vehicle combinations that are really kind of cool. And I really kind of handed off to Maya for doing this little bit of a change. They also have a brand new Farm Animal set 2. So if you've been around the modeling world like I have, you remember the original Farm Animal set. This is a different set, a different mold set, nicer set in my opinion. It looks really cool. Got to take a look at those. But the king of the show, it had to be the F-35B, which was really cool. The show was really great. Had a little over 300 models, several categories. Some great Southern California modelers were out there. Jim Wexler showed up. And you had some other guys from the Orange County IPMS group there that were doing really well. Bruce showed up from Vegas. Joe showed up, or not Joe didn't show up, but some other Vegas individuals showed up. Great show. Had a great time. Met some great people. There's, as with Southern California, you get a really smattering of models, but you had fantastic cars again, beautiful aircraft, and Gundam. The Gundam group was very nice. The action and the painting and the skills in those guys from Orange County and all over Southern California is getting great. Eventually we got to get one of those guys on, or girls on, excuse me. They have a lot of girls in their group, and it's really fantastic to see their work too. It was a really good show. I know that Jim and Rick also went north of the border and for a show. So guys, how did that go?
Yeah.
Never be traveling with me and Josh and Eric Brubaker ever again after this trip.
No, it was good. It was really good. So yeah, 4 of us did a jailbreak from the United States and invaded Canada. What could be better, right? No, it was a good time. So I'm in Portland, so I drove up and met Jim and Josh in Tacoma. We hopped into Jim's car and he drove us up to Eric's place, which is just around Everett, I guess it is.
Yeah, Lake Stephen.
East side of Everett. And we continued our way up, and it was great. We got a place to stay for a couple of nights. I know what the low light was. I don't know, Jim. Do you remember what the low light was?
Well, I got to say the highlight was going to see John Gray play in his band. That was really fun. John Gray, who's an amazing modeler, plays bass in a band. And, I really needed a remedy, and I got a remedy for what was ailing me, you see. So
reference to Black
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, my first musical reference of the show. The Vancouver show was fun. It's always at the Bonsor Community Center. The low light for me, and I don't think this is what Rick is referring to, is trying to find parking there is always a nightmare. But we found parking, and it's a good show. It was a little bit down this year. I was really surprised. The airplanes were great as usual, but the armor was a little bit down. And then I'll let Rick talk about the Ferrari. I think it was the car was amazing. And I'm going to have to do a shout out to the Narc, young Mr. Brubaker, who won Best Junior at the show. So that was the other highlight, was the Narc got a first and a Best Junior.
Yeah, congratulations to Daniel, man. That's awesome. That's just incredible.
That was fantastic. Well, let's talk about one of my highlights. This goes back to John Gray and Remedy playing that show that night. Great music, great time sitting around. But we have video of Mr. Bates and Mr. Scott dancing. So that will soon make its way around the interwebs, or ransoms can be paid. I don't know how we want to address that, Jim, but that was certainly something. Let's put it that way. But my low light, I've got to say this. We cross the Canadian border and we put out our passports and we get them back. And I'm looking forward to a maple leaf stamp. I want another stamp in my passport. Those sons of guns, they don't give out stamps. That was a bone of contention for the next, 20 minutes.
It was actually awful. We're in line. The guys handed back our passport. Brubaker and Lawler get out of the car and demand stamps. They get into this little room. They're looking around for the stamps. The cops are coming. I'm like, I got the accelerator pin trying to get out of there. Oh man, it was brutal. And then on our way back, we're in line at the U.S. border crossing, and the gentleman, asked us our questions, and we say they were for a model show. And the first thing he's like, Warhammer or something else? And I'm like, what the heck, Second time I've crossed at the border that the border guard is quizzing me about my scale modeling. So hopefully he listens to the posse and we're calling him out here. But thank you, border guard.
Yeah. And then he says, what do you have in the trunk? What would you buy at the show? And we told him, and he says, well, I'll take one of those, and one of those. You may pass.
Josh bought a lot more Gundams than he came home with, but the border guards got his summer or his winter planned out.
As you could probably tell, we had a great time at the show. The models were great. As Jim said, the layout in terms of number of airplanes was extraordinary, and the quality on those was fantastic. The cars were great, and Best of Show went to this Porsche. Absolutely a fantastic build, and the amount of work that was done on it. I mean, has white metal doors. I can't remember the name of the kit, Model Hero or something like that. But he had to cut the white metal and resolder them in order to fit. It's all wired up. It was absolutely gorgeous. And he did a couple other kits along the way too in some other categories. And each one of his builds won a first place. So that guy has some mad skills.
Wow. Well, I saw the pictures that the hosing alone on that vehicle was phenomenal with the individual clamps and everything. It was crazy detailed. All right, Zach, didn't you attend a show lately? And if you did, how would it go?
I did attend a show lately.
Yes.
Was that last weekend? Yeah.
I think it was, yeah.
I can't remember, and I'll explain why. Last weekend, I drove up to the lovely D.C. area and Maryland, and I have a story about Maryland. And I attended PAXCon, which is, if you don't know, a show that was put on mostly by the geeks and their club. It was their first one, and it was amazing. Like, it was one of the best shows I've been to. I don't know all of the details, but when I was talking to Darren, or I overheard him, it was about 12 o'clock. So I think registration had just ended or was just about to end. And they said they had over 150 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
I don't know like final model count, but judging by what I saw, I'd say it was pushing easily 300.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
And everything was really, really good. There was a lot of quality work on the tables. The vendors were really nice. I didn't buy too much at the show. Well, I say that. I brought $200 and I was like, I'm not going to spend $200. And then I left with $20. But all I purchased was some restock of my Mr. Leveling Thinner rack, because was running on like 10 milliliters in my bottle. Yeah, it was a worrying time to try and finish up my project. I'm like, will I be able to thin this paint? Who knows? But yeah, so for those who obviously don't know, I work a second shift job. So I get off at 11. So in my infinite wisdom, I'm like, all right, the show is on Saturday. I have to work Friday. So I'm going to leave my house my job in Tennessee at 11 o'clock, drive 6 hours to DC, and then go to a show in the morning. So I drive up. It's raining the whole way, which was super fun. I get to Jackson's house. I'm like, let me take a nap. Do not take a nap. I cannot go to sleep. So then I get there at like 5. We leave at 7 to start heading there. We go to the show. We go to dinner. We go back to Jackson's house, hang out with some friends up there. So by the time 2:30 in the morning runs around, I've been up for like 40 hours.
Oh, my God.
So I don't really remember much of the show because like I was completely out of it. But I remember it was really good.
It looked like it.
So Zach, tell us about, I mean, I know it was kind of their first time doing gold, silver, bronze, and also they had the sticky notes made with feedback. I mean, what was your kind of perception of how that happened, and you know what the judging looked like, and what did you think of the experience overall?
So I judged dioramas, me, Jackson, and I can't remember who it was. I'll blame that on my sleep. I know who it was. I just can't remember. But we judged dioramas, and there were a lot of things in dioramas. I think there were probably 40 things in diorama, which is crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's a lot.
And there was some really good work. Dave Vickers brought quite a lot of stuff. Ooh. So we were going through it, and we started at one end, as you usually do. And we just, we started out sort of giving bronzes to a lot of stuff, which they all deserved it. Like, I don't think we gave a medal away to anyone who did not deserve that medal. Mm-hmm. And if they didn't deserve a medal, they didn't get one.
There you go.
But it was very quick. I think we did that judging of 40 things, and they're dioramas. So there's a lot to judge on a diorama, a lot to look at, a lot to think about. I think we did it in less than 2 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's awesome. How was kind of the judge prep? Did you have a kind of a meeting with it was Nemo that was running the judging of the show, right?
Yeah. So we had about a 20-minute or so judging meeting. We just talked about like, what does gold, silver, bronze mean? Here's your, if it meets this criteria, it's a bronze, it's a silver, this is the gold, that kind of thing. Just laying some ground rules. It was really quick, really easy to understand everything. And then we just got right into it. Like there was no time wasted, no extra things that really didn't need to be going on. It was just, all right, here's what you got to do. Here's what you're judging. What do you want to judge? Go.
And what about the feedback as a judge? I mean, how were the sticky notes a success? Do you think that's an easy way to provide feedback to the modelers?
I think a lot of other people use them. We didn't, mostly just because we kind of forgot. And then we just started writing stuff on the back. We'd leave, a couple, here's some things we saw that might have knocked you down a little bit. And then here's the things we really liked. So we'd leave, a couple bullet points on the back of their entry sheet, just really quick. And like I said, we did 40 something, or probably about 40 something dioramas in 2 hours with 3 people. So it was not that hard. I don't think it added any time whatsoever to add any of that feedback, because you do it while you're judging, right? Like you sit there, you're discussing it. And while you're doing that, if you see something, you just jot it down really quick, which takes 3 seconds.
Right.
So over the course of maybe we'll say put 5 things down on the back of that judging sheet, you've added 15 seconds to your whole time of judging. It's not much.
Yeah, it can be done.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's great. I'm glad they had a great show. And, we had them on a couple episodes ago, and they were talking about the show and, the process they went through. And I'm really glad that it really turned out well for them. They really deserved it. I mean, they've been working on this for years, to tell you the truth. And the Geeks, they did a great job. And their club did a fantastic job from what I saw. And, everything coming back, the feedback has been fantastic. So way to go. Way to set the standard. So if anybody's looking for help for a show coming up, they said a lot of their forms are available if you want to use them. So please reach out to the Model Geeks if you have a show coming up and you want to try the gold, silver, bronze method and their reply method. And please reach out to them, and I'm sure they'll help you out 100%. All right, we're going to move on to Josh. Josh, what's up?
Nothing.
Wow.
This is my busy time of year for work, and so that's pretty much been all consuming. It's just been work. I haven't had a chance to go to any model shows or anything like that.
Did you go, Scott, to Boise?
Nope, I wasn't able to.
Wow.
So, yeah,
he was invited.
I wanted to, but this is a really hard time of year for me to go away.
Yeah, trust me, I understand that. We're at the end of the fiscal year for the government, and my company does a lot of government contracts. So, all right. So let's start out here and let's talk about what everybody's been working on. So this is a project you've been working on for a little bit, or you haven't been working on it, or just started getting working on it. So, Jim, what have you been up to?
Backtracking a little bit, I spent a week and a half traipsing around Alberta and British Columbia looking at airplanes and tanks. And my expectation was I had this great trip that was all aviation related, that I'd come back and want to work on an airplane. And that didn't happen because I got the IPMS Canada RT with a new set of decals. And in there, it had decals for a 135th scale Sherman EZ-8 called Beowulf. And I thought, this is a good excuse to bring out the Sherman EZ-8. So I've been working on the 35th EZ-8, which I'm really enjoying. That is a nice kit. And then since last night was Friday the 13th, and I just picked up a dinosaur, and that was also something I saw on my trip. We went up to Drumheller. I started working on the Bandai Limex Tyrannosaurus Rex. So he's going to be kind of interpreted as a dinosaur skeleton that I saw in Drumheller I think it's called Black Beauty. So I'm going to paint him kind of like dark gray and make them like that. So that's what I've been working on. I will say last night, maybe I was having a little too much fun, and I posted some pictures of the dinosaur driving the tank. He will not be built that way. But I keep waiting for the airplane thing to come back, and it never works. And I don't know what that means. Like, I even sat in a Hurricane and a CF-104 on my trip, and I saw a night run of a Lancaster, and there's a part of me that kind of wants to build a CF-104, but I don't know what's going on. The airplanes aren't feeling right these days.
Don't fight it, Jim. You're an armor modeler, and we all know it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I did get that once. Speaking of F-35s, I did get the Tamiya 172nd F-35, and that looks like an amazing kit. But again, I'm not motivated. So I guess what really happened is, since Rick's now a sci-fi MAK builder, I have to backfill the armor position. And I don't know who's going to, Zach will start building airplanes now or something.
I passed the baton to you.
Talk about a low quality level. Like, you got Rick Lawler up here and you got Jim Bates down on the floor, building armor that looks like it was built by a 3-year-old.
Driven by dinosaurs. Yes.
Driven by dinosaurs. So yes, I exactly am a 3-year-old. So yeah, here we go.
Do you make zoom, zoom, zoom sounds as you're building? Pew, pew.
I can neither confirm nor deny, but there might have been, sitting in the Hurricane, there might have been some sounds made when I was sitting in the Hurricane a few weeks ago.
Yeah, the neighbors called and complained and told him to turn down his Jurassic Park theme music.
And by the way, Scott, I'm disappointed. It was Baby Love Does the Brontosaurus by Cheap Trick. Come on. And I can't remember whose song that originally is. Maybe The Move or something. But anyway.
All right. Zach, what have you been up to?
I am still working on my hideous abomination that is a NASA M113.
That thing is beautiful, dude. I love
it's
that.
Not. Don't say it's beautiful. It's just not.
It's unique,
everything about
man.
it is it's uniquely horrible.
It's intriguing as all get up.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see how he comes to what's the word I want? Realism? I don't know. Because you said it, like I said, it's ugly as hell, but oh my goodness, it's what a find. I covet that find. Yeah. Not that I would have done it, but that's really cool.
Yeah. I really like the giant bendy straw on the side.
Yeah. Yep. It's all good, Zach.
Yeah, and that is like one of the hard parts about this is like the original is just so hideous. It's hard to make it not look hideous as a model. Yeah. And like it's going to look bad no matter what. That's just the nature of the beast. It's just trying to find a way to make it look bad but good, which makes no sense. But it's going. It's almost done.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, it looks like what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. Actually, and at PAXCon, one of the guys there, I'm pretty sure he's in the Geeks Club. I know he's from around that area. Christopher Thote. He also did a NASA 113. He did one of the white ones. Underneath it, like on top of his entry card, he had this really lovely, nice, high quality, in focus photograph of the one I was building, which showed me that pretty much all the details I put on the tower portion of mine are completely wrong. Which is always really nice when you're at the very end of a project. And I mean, technically I could go back and redo it, but I'm not going to. I don't care that much. I'm ready to be done with it. So that was just kind of like, yeah, that's sad to know that now everything I did was just not right.
Yeah, that's a motivator.
Yeah. It really helped me want to push through the end of this project, which I already was done with.
I just like the fact that let's just spray asbestos on the outside of of an aluminium or
nothing can go wrong.
Nothing can go wrong. Yeah, it'll be fine. Asbestos
asbestos and rockets.
Yeah,
it's a recipe for success.
It's like they're building a grade school in the 50s. It's great.
Seriously, no. I mean, it was built in the 60s, so it's probably the same people who built those schools.
Yep.
Zach, how did you create the asbestos? Is that just textured Mr. Surfacer, or what did you do for that?
So there were like 3 iterations of how I tried to do this. The first one, I covered the whole thing in a way too thick coat of epoxy putty, and I like had covered the whole thing, and then I realized this is just way too thick. This is not right. So I scraped all that off, which thankfully was not hard. It peeled off really easily. I was very grateful for that. And then I was looking somewhere for another thing to spend more money on. And I saw the AK anti-slip paste, which I don't think would ever be good for anti-slip under any circumstances. It does not texture up like anti-slip, but it works really well if you want to cover an entire model in asbestos paste. So I then spent like a week. I used 2 tubes of it and a piece of sponge. So I just, put some out on a pallet, dip my sponge in it, and then start tapping it all over the model until I built up a really thick layer, which was then pretty easy to just scrape off. Because as they went to the end of their lifespan with the asbestos, it started to come off because I'm assuming it doesn't, it just doesn't stick very well to straight aluminum. So it would come off in like these really big panels. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to build this, because you've got this horrible brown color asbestos, and underneath it is bright silver paint. And it's just such a weird look. Everything about it is just hideous. It's like if you could make the most unappealing vehicle ever, this is it. So what do I decide to do? I decide to build it. Anyway. So yeah, I just basically, I mean, it's essentially how they made it. Like in reality, I took a paste and I put it all over the thing until it was thick enough.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's great. I mean, like Rick said, it's such a great, unique build that it just hits all those points for me that, you know, it's totally different. It's like it's like something you find just out of the blue, and you've nailed it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's great work.
And that's exactly what happened. Jackson was, he started looking at these things after he saw what was on the Nats decal sheet. And he's like, oh, there's these, you know, these white ones and these yellow ones. And then there's these abominations. And I'm like, I want to build that one.
Yep, there you go. I remember you guys talking about it at Nationals, and you were all stoked. I want that one. I want that one. All right, Josh, I'm going to step out to you. What have you been working on? I know you haven't been working much, but you got to be something working on.
Yeah, no, I keep pretty busy. My issue is I'm really good at starting stuff and then moving on to something else. So right now on my bench, I've got Arma Hobbies P39, which I'm really enjoying. It's all closed up. I'm just starting to I need to prime the exterior, and then I can start moving on that. So that's been really cool. I got back into 3D printing, which I hadn't been able to do for a long time. So I 3D printed some figures from StarCraft, if you're familiar with the Blizzard StarCraft series, that I'm really enjoying painting. And then I 3D printed some large-scale mechs from BattleTech. And so I've been working on those as well. And then I've been working on DOSWorks 155 millimeter French artillery piece from World War One. I've been working on that with Scott.
That's the buddy build you guys are doing,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
That's
it's cool. It's a really nice kit. I really enjoy it. It's been going together well. The details are really nice. It has just been kind of fun to have something to work on with somebody else. It's been a good way to keep things moving.
Yeah, I really like those buddy builds. They're fun. It's when you have other people you can talk with and do stuff with it. I love that. It's a fun thing to do. All right, Rick, what are you up to?
Apparently having a midlife crisis.
Join the club. We're all going to go out. We're going to go buy red Corvettes next week, so we're good.
Oh, are we good? Thanks. No, I don't know what you would like. I don't know what you call it, other than I'm just exploring my sci-fi side, I guess, to a large degree. Of course, I did the Duster and the M110, so those are Vietnam era armor and artillery. But you know, with the facades and some of this other stuff I've been doing, then I did the A-Wing fighter recently. I just got done with that, the Bandai kit. And that was speaking of buddy builds, that was a buddy build with 4 of us. And that was just a blast. Had a great time doing that. And then right off to my side here, I'm a one kit at a time guy. So it's like I finish a kit and then I start going through like, what do I want to make next? And it's always just kind of following my fancy and my whims. I'm kind of enjoying this off the beaten track stuff. So I've got the Machining Krieger Luna Camel sitting here right now, and it's nearly assembled. I'm working on the interior of the cockpit. I was working on that this morning before we got on air. And I'm still trying to decide what the paint scheme is going to be, but we'll see. But I'm absolutely enjoying this kind of little diversion off to my, as Jim might say, 3-year-old side here doing dinosaurs driving tanks.
Yeah, that Camel is a fun kit. The interior of that cockpit, the people call it the tennis ball because it's circular, and but it's pretty cool. Yeah, that's a fun build.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
sure.
I can't wait to see that. All right, Scott, what have you been up to?
Just kind of more of the same. The Viper is really first and foremost. It's kind of my magnum opus build. So I reprinted some more parts I wasn't happy with. They weren't perfect. I'm just really being slow and deliberate. But that's getting really, really close to final primer. Also printed an Elaine Rivard 1/144 scale sandcrawler. I'm not done with it, but just about. Whole entire upper body is done. It's about the size of a shoebox. It's pretty large. I have the kind of the underneath frame to finish, and I've been having my slicing and orienting skills being challenged by the tracks that go on the bottom. Been having a tough time getting tracks printed, but just about done with that. So that'll be great. But mainly focusing on the Viper, as Josh said, we've been working on when we can get together. on those 155 millimeter guns, and those have been really, really cool. We're doing different versions. It'll be neat to see those side by side when they're done. And then Josh and I went and saw The Creator last night, which 2 thumbs up. I was really surprised. I hadn't heard much about it, but I thought it was a really, really good movie. I enjoyed it a lot. It wasn't what I expected.
That's great. I've heard a lot of good things about that. A couple of our people at work did some of the creative initial work for the company that it did the AI prosthetics and stuff like that for the movie. So that's great. I'm glad to see that it really turned out good for you. Can't wait to see that Sandcrawler, dude. That's going to be great. That's going to be such a neat kid. He's got some fantastic, and he does some great work.
Yeah, if you're into, Star Wars or science fiction and you've got a 3D printer and you want a little bit higher quality STL, check out Elaine Rivard Model Shop on Facebook. He has a number of STLs. He does some Babylon 5 stuff, some Galactica stuff, Star Wars stuff, just some UFO subjects. He's working on Stargate, a vehicle from that right now. So he does, subjects that nobody's ever going to make model kits of, but obviously with printers we can do that, and it's really, his modeling is top notch. And if you have any issues, he's great about giving you a hand. I know he's helped me with my issues on the tracks, and he's got great support. So yeah, give him a look. And I also post a lot of his stuff on our Posse group page, so you can take a look at his digital modeling. And it's really, his STLs are really good.
The Plastic Posse podcast is sponsored by Tankcraft, makers of the highest quality cutting mats for your workbench. Tankcraft cutting mats are heavy-duty, self-healing, come in 2 awesome sizes, and have World War II tanks and aircraft blueprint-style drawings on them. Spread out your next build on an olive green M4 Sherman or a Dunkelgelb King Tiger. They've got aircraft too. Check out all the designs and range of unique modelling tools at tankcraft.com. That's TANKRAFT.com. And remember, Plastic Posse podcast listeners can use the code POSSE15 to get 15% off your first order.
All right. Well, let's start our first discussion, and I'm going to pass it over to Scott for this one.
All right. Well, thanks, Grant. Well, recently I decided to ascend up high up into the Rocky Mountains to the model monastery where our spiritual advisor, the great and mighty John Everett, lives. And he asked me why I was there, what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm here to bother you, but I also need a good question for this group of great friends that I have here. And he said, okay. And so he posed the question that I'm going to now pose to the group for discussion. And the question is, of all the models that each of you have completed, which one still holds the strongest emotional value? And maybe said another way, if your house was on fire, God forbid, and you only had a few seconds to grab something off of your display shelf, what would it be? And more importantly, why? So I'm going to start with Mr. Shizzle Dizzle, Mr. Grizzle, and I'm going to say, Zach, which one of your models are you the most attached to? And if that fire's happening, which one do you grab?
So I went and looked at my shelf a minute ago trying to figure out my answer to this question. And all of the models that I would have said this, I have thrown away. So clearly I didn't have that much of an emotional attachment to them. But those would have been like my first models. But with what I still have, so this is actually not one I've built, but I have one of JB's models and I have one of Jensen's models. And I think those would probably be the ones I grab, because obviously I can always build more models for myself. But to have something that a friend has given me, you can't really get that back. And they're both really nice models. So there's also that. And then I can, pass them off as mine at show. It just works out every way. But as for like, if I was to pick one of my models, it would probably be the one that me and Jackson built at Nats last year, because that was just such a fun thing to do, where we started them at my house and we finished them at the Posse bench. And there's just a lot of, there's a lot of stuff surrounding that Gaz truck that I really, it's nice to think about. It was a fun time to do. So that would probably be my choice, either not my models or that one.
Well, I mean, I kind of thought about that as well, because as you know, model exchange is something that's really important to me. I'm lucky enough to have work in my case from a bunch of my friends. Still have some people, Zach and Rick, that I need to get models from. But I'm with you. I'd grab a box and I'd be running over there and putting those in there. But aside from that, that's a great answer. That Gaz has obviously some great memories attached to it for you. I really see that being important. So Grant, I'm going to ask you next. Which one are you grabbing? And don't say other people's models. Which one of your models are you grabbing and why?
Okay. Let me see. I think for me, it'd be two. Okay. Let's go with two. First would be I did a Bandai C3PO 112 scale a while ago, like 2017. And that kit was a good kit, but I actually stripped all the gold off of it and went down to the plastic and then repainted it completely with steel color paint, let's put it that way. So, and that was a long kit. And it was first time I used Alcad, and that kit fought me the whole way when I started taking the metal off, or the plating. Yeah. It was actually 2 times because I screwed up the first one. The first one I used bleach, and you shouldn't use bleach because bleach makes the plastic, and Bandai is notoriously thin plastic, those kits. So it just kind of melted into a puddle. So I got another one and I cleaned it with Simple Green and a couple other little things, and that took a while. But just long story short, too late, I know. That color, that thing fought me the whole way, and I ended up taking a third at nationals in, I think, Phoenix with that. So that was one of my first nationals medals, and that would be my favorite. For a second, I have a diorama or a little vignette, little thing I worked on. It's been working on for like a year now, and I keep on adding parts to it. Is a sewer pipe, and it's got 2 Space Marines in it. And there's just been a lot of work in that. I think that really means a lot to me because the amount of work and how that came from an idea of just a piece of paper laying on the ground that I saw laying like a half a pipe. And it's crazy, I know, but it just kind of grew from there. So, and those would be the 2 I take. And the reason why is just because the amount of work, the time I spent on them, and how they turned out, I think has been very well. So that's my answer.
No, I think that's really good. A lot of effort is a really good reason, I would imagine, as well. So Jim, what about you? What would you grab as the apartment was combusting there, and why?
Well, it's good to not having any friends, because then I can't answer my friends' models. So my smartass answer is, can I leave the models and take the books? Because that's what really matters to me. But if you're going to make me pick a model, I'm really selling out here. Like, I'm going lowest common denominator. I'm going to say a P-51 Mustang. And I'm disgusted with myself that I have chosen that type. But there's a story here. So when I was young, there was a museum in Hamilton, Canada, called the Canadian Warplane Heritage. They still exist. And they got a P-51. And I was, again, everything I think operates. I'm 6 years old. And they got this Mustang and they repainted it. It was silver with red panels, and it had a giant tiger on the side. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I always wanted to build one. And in about, 2016, 18, I finally got an Airfix 72nd scale Mustang. I got the leading edge decals, and I finally built this kit I'd wanted to do since I was a kid, and got it done. And it ended up in 2 magazines. It won Best Airfix at IPMS Vancouver. Clearly, my bribes worked. And I think that would be the one I would take. I think it's got my best natural metal finish. In fact, I'm scared to ever build another Mustang because I don't think I can ever reach to that level. And it was, I don't want to say it was the easiest build, but it was pretty straightforward. The other choice that I would have said in the past is a Mosquito, but that's now in Utah, so I don't need to worry about it. If the house plug goes up, it's at Scott's house, so it's safe, which I think what we're really all doing by giving Scott models is we're just saving them. If our place goes up in flames, they're all at Scott's, so we can replenish our case.
Well, I appreciate the loan. I value those a lot.
Oh, so. No. That was a donation. That's nice. Yours now. There was a Canadian museum that was deaccessioning some airplanes, and I loved what the rule was. You can do whatever you want with it, but we don't want them to see them back here ever again. And I'm like, that's how I feel with my models. But yeah, the Mustang, just it was kind of just a long-standing dream to do it, and to finally finish it and have it come close to your vision of standing on an airfield when you're 8 years old or whatever it was. Maybe I was 10. I don't know. to see it and then see that represented in scale, it just felt like it was closing a chapter. Though, as I said, I do feel a little ugly that I just picked a Mustang. Like, come on, I'm the British guy. It should have been a Mosquito or Hurricane. But anyway, so I think it is interesting to me, and Zach's one is a great example that it's not necessarily the model, but it was the experience. And I wonder if mine was a little bit that way too, of it was having a dream, finally completing it. In Zach's case, it was building and probably all the input and everything that was going on, that it isn't necessarily the finished work, that it is the experience getting there, as this always is. And I'm glad that you went to see The Man on the Mountain.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, that's a really good point. As I look at, I don't have a lot of my builds. I don't build a 10 anyway, but the ones that I tend to be sort of drawn towards as far as that goes are a lot of the ones we've done with Models for Heroes on our 48 and 48 hour group builds. And, you know, in 48 hours, you can't really do a lot of things maybe you would normally do on a project, but those builds mean a lot. And what they mean is camaraderie and building for a better cause. And when you look at those projects, what comes back are memories. You know, Zach's talked about the memories of building at Nats, and Grant's talked about, you know, overcoming some real challenges. And you've talked about what that Mustang meant to you. And so I think that element of emotions and memories is really, really important. It's something when John first gave me this question, I maybe didn't consider as fully as I do now, but yeah, I really like that. Josh, let's go to you. House is on fire and you're heading for the door. Which one are you grabbing and why?
Well, I think my answer has actually changed after listening to everyone else. I'm going to preface this by saying, one, Scott's not allowed to comment because he has an overwhelming positivity bias. And two, a lot of this might be just more of where I've been headspace wise lately more than anything else. I don't know. But my initial reaction was nothing. I have a really hard time looking at my finished builds because I tend to just see where they fell short of my vision, if that makes sense. I'm glad I have stuff in my case. It's not like I'm embarrassed of it or anything like that, but I wouldn't have a problem if someone came in and said, hey, you got to throw all these away. That being said, I still work on stuff because I'm hoping that one day I will achieve that. You know, if I keep practicing, I'll get to where I want to be. So I think the model I'd save I haven't made yet. Like I said, that was my first reaction. But after listening to you guys talk a little bit, I have a Tiger 1, a 48 scale Tiger 1 that we did as a posse group build. I think it was last year. It was a 48-hour build, and it was one of my first kind of more social model building experiences. And I had just a really, really good time building that model. And when I look at it, I'm not seeing where it fell short. I'm remembering the experience I had when I made it. And I think that resonates with me really well. And so the more I think about it, I think that's probably what I would grab, not because of how well it was done, but because of the experience and the memory it brings back when I look at it. And I'm really glad you guys mentioned some builds like that, because otherwise I don't think I would have really thought about it.
No, that's a great perspective, Josh. And since I'm not allowed to comment, I'll just maybe disagree with you a little bit, but I really like your answer. And that Tiger is a great little model. And you're right. These events and these memories that are tied to, it's obvious that all of us feel like that. So save the best for last here, Rick. You've done a lot of models. Some of them are really well known. Some of them have been in museums and a lot of publications. So what is Rick Lawler's answer to this question?
Well, I think you asked actually two questions. One being, what is your most emotional tied to model? And then secondly was, my house is on fire. What am I grabbing? And those can't be the same thing for a lot of the same reasons that we've talked about. So I'll go back to kind of the emotional side here. The reason I can't talk about what I take out with my fire necessarily is because I don't have those models anymore, because I've given them away. Or as you mentioned, like the first one, the one that comes to mind for sure is Burden of Sorrow. And that's in a museum now. So that is safe, probably with a better sprinkler system than even your house has, Scott. So, and it was a real honor and a pleasure to be able to do that one. But that one has the most emotional attachment that I have ever experienced in trying to create scale modeling of anything in it. I've talked about the story here before, so don't need to get into that, but it's based on a life experience of going through the Holocaust Museum, and then things just started coming into place afterwards. And it was a real emotional build. So that one is the top of my list. And then I'm thinking here as we're going through this. So the funny thing about it is, as I moved through kind of my modeling career, is that models became more of a disposable commodity. I build models, they go into magazines, they do box art, they fit all these different industry roles. And so the emotional attachment over time to any particular piece is it's on a, diminishing returns. So when I think back, what would I grab? And these are the ones that I do still have in my case. I did a Bedford truck lorry from Accurate Armor way back in the day when I first started breaking into magazines. And the funny story about it is that Pat Stansel contacted me and says, hey, would you want to write an article? And would you like and how are you with resin kits? Well, I had just been practicing photo etch like crazy. And I had photo etch in my head while he's saying resin. And so I says, oh, I'm great with resin, thinking I was talking about photo etch. So a couple of weeks later, stack of kits show up and they're all Accurate Armor and all these different resin kits. And I'd never built a resin kit in my life before that point in time. And so that was me trying to figure out how to do resin kits. And then it was the added pressure of this is my first real good break to try to get into magazines and things like that. I still have that model. It means a lot to me because of that reason. It was it was one of those step up your game type models because I had to be so diligent, had to be so conscientious of what I was doing. And I was totally out of my zone here. So that one there really, really does mean quite a bit to me. And it's an old model. It doesn't look great compared to some of the other ones that I've done since, but emotionally that one's fits that bill. And there's a lot of them kind of in that same era that are the same for me. Those first one that got to this magazine, or the first one where I did photo etch, or the first one where, as some of you said, has struggled or things like that. Those tend to mean the most to me than a lot of the more recent kits that I've done, for better, for worse. And then Scott, real quick, if you name a model, it's yours. You just got to name it.
Oh man, that's awesome.
And and speaking of that, I'll bring it kind of to current days. So when I started kind of having my midlife crisis here, which probably started about a year and a half ago, I built that Trudy's junkyard scene, the little Warhammer deal, and I gave that away to Eric Brubaker this last weekend. I took it up to his place because he had mentioned that he really liked it as well. And for me, that was an emotional one. That's the only one that's been sitting in my living spaces that I would look at over the last year or so, just because it was so unique. It was different. It was out of my comfort zone, especially at that time. And Eric had helped me move it back and forth to my car when we went to the Seattle show there. And he'd said, well, if you ever want to get rid of that. And so it was like the perfect opportunity to stick it in the back of my car and give it up to Eric. And I did the same thing with Josh and the Gundam we did on our buddy build. I gave that to the Zegok to Josh on our way up as well. So those kind of things, as we're talking about the events around things, the buddy builds, or just shooting the breeze and someone admiring your piece and being able to extend that to somebody, those tend to mean more to me now than any particular build that I'm doing.
Yeah, that's well said. I'm pretty good friends with Eric, and I can tell you that he was really blown away by that. I mean, I think, kind of in both directions, because A, he just thinks it's an amazing piece of work, which it is, but B, I think he also knows how much it meant to you, Rick. And that's what I love about this, turning these shows into events with your friends and then giving each other your models. I mean, I know people hear us talking about it all the time, but I think it really makes a difference. First of all, I think as our own, I'd like maybe to get your input on this, everybody. But I mean, I know I see in my modeling, when I look at a model, I see the flaws immediately, right? Because I'm the one that spent all the time with them. But other people, I think, view your own work differently. I certainly, whether it's, Josh or Zach or Grant or Jim, Rick, I've seen all of your work in person, and, we compliment each other, and, usually the response is pretty humble. Yeah, but there's this and this. And anyway, giving a model to somebody, I think, means a lot. And I think it's an awesome part of the hobby. It's something that I really hold dear, because I look in the case and I see memories. I see my friends. I see Josh's power suit from Fallout, and I see, Jim's Mosquito, and, I see Jeremy Moore's 109 and Spud's Achilles, and just, it's kind of an honor. It's all, I almost look at it as as the gift that it is. It's now my responsibility, all joking aside, to kind of preserve those pieces, and that's really cool. Anyway, what you guys think about that?
Well, I had a different thought as you're talking about this, and it kind of goes back to something I said earlier. The Vancouver show was great, but it really was just an excuse to hang out and get away for the weekend. And in some ways, the show was the least important part, going to see the band, the road trip with the guys, dinner at the Vietnamese place. Those are the events that are important, and we just happen to do it around a model show. And, Scott, you've lost your mind if you think the mosquito's any good, but, I'm glad you appreciate it, and I'm happy to have it. I feel a little honored that somebody wanted my model because, again, they look like a 3-year-old built them. But, it is cool. I've got a lot of models. I kind of have a different group of people's models. I've got models of IPMS Seattle members who are no longer with us, which is kind of my tribute. And that kind of actually makes me a little bit sad to have those in the case. So it must be nice to have a case full of your friends' models who are still with us when I've got a case full of people who aren't with us, and kind of my little tribute to them. But yeah, I think that the whole thing is the hobby. It kind of creates the environment around which we can gather and connect and build community, rather than the hobby being the focus. And I'm glad to hear there's more than just me, kind of rambling on about this topic, because my memories of the weekend are not going to be the show, though that Porsche, Ferrari, or Ford, or whatever it was amazing. It was the time spent with Rick and Eric and Josh that was the highlight. And the fact that hopefully pictures of me dancing don't end up on the internet, because I don't want to get disbarred.
Oh, it's going to be great when it leaks on Twitter.
It's on the way. Let me push play right now. Here we go.
It's Jim doing the Carlton.
I don't know what was that dance? I have no idea what you were doing. It was the shaky jig thing here. I don't know.
It's actually called the hallucination dance, because if you watch me doing it, you're going to start hallucinating.
Well, I'll just back up what Jim said, specific to the weekend. Yes, it is about the events and the camaraderie and just hanging out with the people, and every show's like that. We came back from Nats, most of us, all of us. And, that's what I remember is, I remember Jackson and Zach starting to work on that model that he's been talking about here in the room and things like that. So even that has an emotional connection to me, because I got to see it while they were trying to get it done and banging out overnight when I'm trying to go to bed. I'm like, you guys are crazy. So that kind of stuff still has some sort of an emotional part of it. And it's really interesting, Jim. I think what you said about the people who have your models in your collections, say yours with past modelers, and Scott with, I guess I'm still a live modeler, so I'm not in his collection though. But when you were saying that, I'm going like, I oftentimes think about, when I'm gone, said and gone and stuff, and my kids have to clean out the house, what is the legacy of building model kits? It's such a geeky sort of a hobby that we do, and we make these huge collections of models. If I don't throw them away, they're sitting on shelves gathering dust or whatever. So having people who appreciate our work, our friends, like we're talking about, I think that's where the legacy kind of moves on. My boys, they know what I do. They've seen my models. They might take one, just let it gather dust in their place for another 30 years or whatever. But knowing that someone that I've shared time with, that shared experiences with, that we have this common passion, I guess you would call it, for the hobby, to give them even a third grade or 3-year-old's skill level model is really kind of like almost giving them sort of a, dare I say, a love letter. This is like, here, here's an expression. I spent some time. This is, I'm giving something of myself to you, and knowing that person, the recipient, understands what went into that, no matter what the final look of it is. It's just like, that really means a lot, because I know the time, I know the patience, I know the, whatever that went into it. And I think that's I think hits the heart of that part of the conversation, at least for me.
That's excellent thoughts, Rick. Well, for those of the listeners out there, if you'd like to participate, we'd love to see kind of what your thoughts are on this. John has a great question. So, post in the Plastic Posse group if you've got some models that you've completed that you're still kind of really, they have a strong emotional tie to you. Post some photos and tell us why. And we'd love to see those in the group. So anyway, thanks a lot, guys. Good discussion.
All right. So let's talk about the facade group build. All right. Started in 9/1 and and it's going to end in October. Wait a second. We have an update. In order to get more people on board and help those going to all the model shows and events, we have consulted with our expert, Rick Lawler, and determined that we will extend the AK Rick Lawler Propaganda Plastic Posse Facade Group till Thanksgiving. Thank God. Thank you so much. I have been trying to do that.
Hooray.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. So I am going to reach out and say where I'm at right now. I have my facade base coated. Actually went to Michael's, found a little shadow box that actually fits it perfectly with a little set off so I could put a street on it, a little sidewalk. So I'm really happy with that. I've got some basic colors on it right now, but with shows coming up, I was a little hurried. So I thought the week after I got back from MMSI, I was going to be really busy. But thank you, Rick. I really do appreciate the extension. Thank you so much.
It's not just for you, Grant. It's for the community. I'm a gracious guy.
Yeah, just all fan mail can go to Rick Lawler at propaganda.com. So I really do, we all do appreciate it. But I want to talk about a couple that I've seen so far on the webpage. Christian Jacobs facade is, I have a picture of it, and we have a picture of it in our show notes that I'm looking at right now. And it is so good. He nailed the door. The signs look really well. Everything looks so good in his build. The tones, and I remember this from the page. I think he used only the colors that were in the box. So that's a great thing too. And, this is a reminder, the facade doesn't have to come from AK. You can make your own. Please remember that. You could take a piece of styrofoam or, a sheet styrene and start making your own. And a lot of people have. And I'm really great to see that, including Mr. Rick Lawler has made a second one from Warhammer Parts, which looks fantastic. Eric, another great friend of the show, has made his own, took it up to Vancouver, and I believe won a third place with it, which is great. I'm really glad to see that. Not all of us are like JB and, start a month and a half early on this before we even started. So he will be making another one. He better be making another one now that we're going.
He better be, otherwise he's busted. He said it publicly.
He said it publicly, so he's got till Thanksgiving now, JB. So you have to do another one. And I'm tired from SMC. No, you got to get it done.
We know he can do it because he takes it into the bathroom with him. So, at least 3 or 4 times a day he gets to work on it.
That's more than I really wanted to know, but hey.
Yeah, Grant, there's some great. Marco Lips posted, and he's got a photo of he's scratch building one himself. Yep. He's got a photo of a pub that means a lot to him, and that's looking really cool. Pat McGrath, our friend, Irish Pat, he's been scratch building his own. That's really cool. Joshua Scott, I know, has worked on one you talked about, Rick's 2 so far. Yeah. So he's leading by example, as well as Eric Brubaker. So there's some really great ones. And Doug Smith, he did a really good one. He finished his pretty early on, but yeah, it's, please share yours with us on the Plastic Posse group. Just if you post something, there's not a group build page like a lot of our group builds. Just use hashtag facade group build when you post it, and then we can, easily search for them and everything. But yeah, appreciate the extension. Mine's on the bench, and I've got it kind of sanded up and repaired some damage and ready for primer. So hopefully get going on that soon.
Well, I'm glad we have an extension, because I didn't even think about participating until I was in the car with these yahoos last weekend. And I don't know if the idea came to me or somebody suggested to it, but when I start thinking about facades and I start thinking about bricks in the wall, and I got to do something rock and roll themed. So
we provided shame and inspiration in the backseat of that car. So this is going to be He's got a special one coming. I guarantee it.
Well, the problem is I have no conceptual idea. I just have like an idea. And now I got to figure it out. So there'll be bricks. There'll be a wall. There might be something pink. That's about all I can speak.
And perhaps a pig.
There you go.
Perhaps a pig, perhaps not. Who knows?
Sounds like a winner to me.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
Just a reminder to the posse. Are you a member of the Plastic Posse group page on Facebook? You're not. Well, you should be. It's an awesome community of modelers who share their work and help each other out.
Time for a reminder that the Plastic Posse is just one of several great scale modeling podcasts, excluding the Mojo. Oh no, they're great too, but they just celebrated 100 years. You can head over to modelpodcasts.com and you will find links to them as well as several model related blogs and vlogs, such as something called A Scale Canadian TV, but more importantly, that wonderful gentleman, Chris Wallace, and his Model Airplane Maker YouTube and blog. And if you want good content, look at Model Airplane Maker. If you want weird content, 6-year-old content, go to A Scale Canadian and check out all the pods. And I think there were 16 new ones that started since last week.
Oh, jeez. We need to talk to Stuart and the powers that be about maybe adding a YouTube channels, Rick. I don't think there's a YouTube section on there yet.
All right. So this is the part where we talk about models or things we see on the Plastic Posse podcast page. So we started doing this again, and it's really fun. I'm going to go ahead and start off because I'm not going to pick one model. I'm going to pick a whole bunch. All the images that are coming from SMC. We are seeing some fabulous, great models, figures, dioramas, ships, aircraft, everything you can think of coming out of SMC. And they're coming from everybody, not just JB, TJ, and Jensen. There's so much, for me, there's so much inspiration in a lot of these, especially the figures for myself. Some of the dioramas are phenomenal, and it just great work. And that's what I want to talk about, is that what's coming out of SMC right now is just the work. You know, everybody says the hobby's dying, and you see a show like SMC, or you see IPMS Nationals, or you see the Vancouver show pictures. It's not. No, I don't care what anybody says. It's just getting better. And it's just getting better and better.
I also want to shout out, Grant, all of the great responses that we got from our last episode. TJ talked about,
yes,
personal modeling style, and the Plastic Posse group just really stepped up. I mean, unbelievable photos, lots of great work, and some good thoughts there. So, I mean, again, if you're not a member, it'd be worth a member, just to, worth joining the group just to go see everything that's been posted in the last week or two. So
there's some fantastic modelers out there. They're all of them are great. They're all great to see. I love the comments on how they, where they're at and how they got there, where, in relationship to TJ's question. And it's just been, phenomenal. And I really want to thank, like Scott did, I want to thank all of you for stepping up, posting your pictures and stuff like that. And, it's still open. Go ahead and post some more, please. We'd love to see them. All right, Rick, what did you pick for the Plastic Posse podcast page, Facebook page?
Well, I've scrolled down and I found Stuart Halton, and he's made a ATST, but not just an ATST. He's taken the Bandai. It's a 148 scale kit. And I love the way he describes it, because he says, with all the Star Wars lovers in this group, so please forgive me for taking liberties. And that's the way I've been feeling as I start taking liberties as I kind of move into this little Star Wars fantasy world. So I guess bottom line is you don't really need to apologize, just have some fun. But he's turned this into, love the story, ATGRX. And as he writes, it's after the war surplus ATSTs were sold off and converted to use in a new sport of Galaxy Rally Cross. And so he's got this ATST in a sprint position, one leg up. It's painted in an overall dark gray color with rally stripes of a bright orange and is sort of numbering on the sidelines. It's perfect. It's on a small base that just sets it off nicely. That's my eye catcher of the week.
Yeah, that is, the action pose alone is phenomenal. I love what he did with that too. And it is a great build. Good choice, Rick. Josh, what about you?
So I've been following Steve Baker has been posting progress on a 109 he's been working on. And I know it's 72nd scale, but I have to keep reminding myself of that every time I look at pictures, because it looks like it's 48. His paintwork, his weathering, it's not done yet, and I'm excited to see how it's finished up. But it's it's been inspiring. I picked up that same kit at Matt's, and every time I'm looking at his pictures, it really makes me want to dig it out and get started on it. So Steve, good work. Keep it up. I can't wait to see when it's done, but I'm loving it.
It's a great build. He's so good at his finishes. Like you said, the community is full of really amazing aircraft modelers, Jeremy Moore, Luftram, but Steve continues to elevate his game with every build. It's really a solid choice.
The way he did that is just the man is a master. It's just, he is. All right, Jim, what do you got?
I'm going to go a little off the style here, and I've got to say I really love Christian Gurney's Sea Gladiator that he did in flying. And what my favorite part about it is he did a flying model. He's got the pilot giving us the V for victory. Plus, I just like the Sea Gladiator. He's got it mounted on the, I guess that's the Who roundel. I don't know where that came from. I'm kidding. It's the RAF roundel by Basis by Bill. But it just looks so good, looks really nice. And airplanes are supposed to fly. And I love that he included the pilot in there.
Yeah, I like the V for victory sign. That, like you said, that just pops and it really looks good.
Yeah. And the pilot just is so well done. That's why I don't build flying airplanes. I can't paint pilots.
Speaking of our road trip, Jim and I doing music trivia all the way up to Canada without that's where this comes from.
The disturbing part about this was we're watching John Gray's band, and they're playing mostly like 70s to 90s classic rock, alternative rock, and Josh Scott knows none of these songs. And I'm like, poor young man, how do you not know these songs? And I think literally the only one he knew was Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond. Like that was the only thing that they played that he had any clue. I'm worried for the youth today. They know all their anime and Star Wars, but they don't have their bedrock foundation in rock and roll. It's bad.
All right. Speaking of the youth today, Zach, what's your favorite?
So I've obviously got to shout out Mr. iBones Models, Ian Bonner's Stu 42. I think it's a 42. Yes. He has done, it's like one of those Kursk era, it's Dunkelgelb with the green squigglies all over it. But what really makes it just incredible is the chipping he's done.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure he said he did this with hairspray. It just has such a level of fidelity. Just, it's so perfectly in scale. I need to ask him how he did this again because I need to blatantly copy it immediately.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the way he's sprayed his pattern, it looks like some dude with with an air compressor was spraying it in the middle of this field in Russia. It just looks so good. It's such a tight pattern, but the chipping is just out of this world.
Yeah.
I'm assuming he used like a toothpick for it. Cause I mean, obviously he didn't use a brush. Like these scratches are just crazy.
Yeah. Plus the way he sees green, it's a superpower.
It really is.
It really is Ian's superpower. That shade of green, just a lot of modelers do okay with it, but I think he really takes his greens to another level. I don't know what it is, but he's got that magic eye for green.
He does. Everything he's ever done that has green, even adjacent to it, it's just like, oh, it's green. That's great.
Yeah, he does have that is a superpower.
Yeah.
And there was no beer spilled on this one, so it is even better. But
that you know of.
That's exactly good point. Sorry, he might have spilled beer on. But like you said, the chipping, and if he did that with hairspray, he had to have used a toothpick.
Yeah.
As you know, with hairspray, if you use a brush, it's all coming off.
Yeah.
But it's the scratching is so finite and in scale that it's just amazing. And it's a very good choice. A very, very good choice.
I have to ask, is his superpower painting green or having his models destroyed by TSA?
Yes. That's correct.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. Speaking of TSA, I saw a real scary picture a couple of days ago of Sam Dwyer, Mr. Sam Dwyer, the Sam Dwyer's Panther coming out of the scanner upside down. But I saw it on the pictures of it on the table today, and it looked fine. So
yeah, it seems like it's survived well, thankfully.
Yeah, it did. Thankfully, it did. So
that was my question. I saw that picture, and I kind of wondered what happened after, and I didn't hear anything. So I'm like, oh, that's not good. But I'm glad to hear it survived.
Yeah, it's on the table. I saw pictures of it. I'm sure some of you all saw them today, and it looks great. It really looks good. All right, so I am going to move over to Mr. the Man, the Myth, the Legend, our godfather here at the Posse, Scott. What was your choice?
Wow, it's a good thing I've upped my payments to you. It's really paying dividends. What caught my eye is John Fenton. He posted a picture of a kit that I have in my stash. I'm going to back up just a little bit. I am a huge Miyazaki fan, and he did a movie a few years ago called The Wind Rises, and it just blew me away. And it's about the designer of the Claude and the Zero, semi-true story, I think. Anyway, this is a Wingsy Kits Claude, and he's kind of incorporated some, Grant and Rick level basing and storytelling with it, with some figures and a carrier deck. The kit is stunning, and the presentation is top notch, A+. I mean, to me, it catches my eye, and I just want to just keep staring at it. It's really, really well done. Nicely done, John. Really, really good piece, but love the subject and definitely love the modeling.
Yeah, it's really, it kind of gives me that every time I see it. I think of Tora when they're taking off for the attack. And, it's really, John, you're doing fabulous work. I mean, it really, the Claude is great. As Scott said, the figures are also really, really good.
Getting to meet you at MMSI and getting to talk with you was such a pleasure. And you were so generous with your time. And, for me, MMSI, I've never been to a show that compares to it as far as meeting incredible people and not just talented people, but people that are very warm and very, I don't know, the vibe is very, very different from an IPMS show. And you and Grant have gone to some of those together. So I don't know, maybe you guys have a feel for how that works.
Grant, you start off.
Oh, okay. Well, I've never been to an MMSI show, so I am going this year, actually in 2 weeks. I think it's 2 weeks.
Dragon Grant, no matter what, he's coming.
Yeah, I'll be there. I've already got plane tickets and everything. That's going to be fantastic. I've talked to Gary and seen Gary's work for years down in San Diego, their IPMS show down there, which is run by a pretty decent group of guys. The show is kind of smaller, but they have a huge vending area, which it's in a great area. It's in one of their annexes for the Air Museum down there, so it's really nice. From what I understand, I've talked to guys at Small Scale, Jim and Barry. I've talked to Penny when we were in Vegas. I've talked to a couple other people, and the whole atmosphere seems to be completely different, which is, it seems to me that it's more of a helping environment, if that's the right word, I guess, more of a coaching environment, more of a understanding and kind of environment where people, they take time and they show you, tell you what you need to do, how you need to improve, or if you're doing good, what to keep up. And I can tell you this, I've actually tried to work with Gary a couple times, but I've had family issues pop up at least once. And if it's anything like Gary here, it's going to be great. I can't wait, because it's just going to be, and I'm also an assistant judge, which I'm, a backup judge, helping judge, I guess you would call it. And I'm also judging with some fantastic people like John Rosenkrantz. Not nervous at all. So that's going to be interesting too. So, that's my feel of it.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty accurate in certain respects. I'm sure it will make Barry and Jim very happy to hear that. And from my perspective, I only got involved with the IPMS over here purely because that was the only contact in the modelling scheme of things. Like in San Diego, I was hoping the actual old figure painting group was still going when I moved to San Diego nearly 12 years ago. I joked with Bill Horan about that. And unfortunately, it wasn't. I've got a love of building World War I aircraft anyway, as a side issue. That's my guilty pleasure, definitely. I don't care how long it takes to build them, but more about that later. So I just went along to the IPMS purely out of curiosity, and I was literally the only figure painter in there. And thankfully, it's grown. I haven't seen much of the guys this year because they changed their dates to every last Saturday of the month, and I haven't been able to get along to any of them purely because of work commitments. It's been bizarre. So yeah, that was my involvement with them. And as I say, great group of guys, but that is as far as it goes with me, I suppose. I'm not a member of the IPMS. It was really it's a local model meeting, and just to gain, inspiration and get sort of useful information from the genres that they build and paint as well. Because I'm very sort of open-minded. There's always something very useful, no matter what genre you paint or build. You're going to find something, definitely.
Let's back up, Gary. I know that recently, a few months ago, you were on Small Subjects and you kind of went through your background. But for our listeners here, tell us a little bit about who Gary is and, where he came from, and then maybe how you ended up in this hobby as an extremely, extremely talented.
Don't stop any of that, Scott. You're always too high a praise. Us English people can't cope with it. Just say we're okay. We're happy with that.
Yeah, like TJ, you're okay. Yeah, that World War I biplane thing. You're okay at that. I think if you keep at it, you might make something of yourself someday.
So it could be such a long story and such a short one. And how did I get involved in it? And it's like everyone else. As a child, I've got 3 brothers, and one way of controlling us, my dad found was painting models, putting them on the ceiling, hanging them down, the old Airfix kits, etc. Painting a huge amount of the soldiers in his downtime at work. He was a policeman. He started at after he left the Navy. So there's his military background, and his father was Navy, etc. And before him. So he's got a massive love of military history, installed it into us. There was no getting out of it. We were dragged around every museum. I said that on Small Subjects. We went to every museum known to mankind in the UK. And just educated it all in that, etc. And then just picking up the brushes yourself. You want to have a go yourself. And it was just a natural progression. He bought us our kits, and I remember getting a Matchbox kit of a little Humber armoured car with a little diorama, and that set me off. And then, as I said on Small Subjects, it really was going to the National Army Museum summer camp that was phenomenal for kids to go to. It was, it's not only is it a great museum based in Chelsea in central London, but this summer camp they did was 6 weeks for a whole summer holiday, every Monday to Friday, and it was films, talks, guided tours. And the most important thing was either an afternoon or a morning model making on figures donated by Airfix Multipose or the History Series, Collector Series, I can't know what they were called. And you had guys from the British Model Soldier Society came along, and they gave us guided tips and helped us in our pursuit of those. And that flipped the switch in figure painting. From there, I went to the London British Model Soldier Society club meet. That was only once a month. But then I was very fortunate for that rolled into going to such places as Euromilitaire, which was, at the time of, the premier competition. It was definitely in Europe at the time. And just seeing great work from just some great sculptors and painters. I think John was on, the guy, Tony Greenland. I saw his tanks. He wasn't just an amazingly skilled engineer, not only painter. He was using oil paints on them long probably before it became fashionable. And just seeing people like that. And then, we had the American invasion with the Spanish. The likes of Bill Horan came over and Mike Good and were just showing just like a very different painting technique because we'd all been using oils at that time. And I'm sort of like, late teenage years, early teenage years to late teenage years at this point before I gave it up like everyone else. But I'd managed to just get a really, really good grounding of the figure painting plus, a bit of armour, etc. No planes at that time. I'd given up on those a long time ago. I got stuck into work. And if anyone listens to Small Subjects, they'll know I work for a product company here based in San Diego, but we distribute worldwide, and I'm on their sort of creative department. I'm a stylist by trade, and that's what I do. I run around the planet, it seems, just at Fashion Week and stuff like that, doing Miami Swim Week and doing glamorous stuff. But in my spare time, I just like to paint. That is really the bottom line. I just want to sit at my desk and flip the creative switch. That's probably been moved away from work, the higher up the food chain I've gone. Before was such a creative output that it didn't allow for anything else. To get anywhere in the industry, you couldn't allow for anything else. And it wasn't until literally a couple of months before COVID, I picked the brushes up again and bought a couple of figures, started painting, and unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever way you look at it, found a Wingnut Wings kit, and that just opened up Pandora's box. And and the stash has grown immeasurably since. I've got plenty of vehicles, but what I've done is I've tried to let it go organically as opposed to going deliberately at stuff I'm interested in historically and find out. I think it's just the maturity is find out what my painting style lends towards. I wouldn't say most effective. You just sort of have a good idea of what it lends itself to. And consequently, I have gone down the fantasy painting road a huge amount and got involved in that genre in a big way, I feel now as well. And it influences massively what I do painting wise. because there's by nature, I'm very sort of have a rebellious streak. I don't want to be told what to do. I'd rather find out on my own accord whether it's painful or not. So the fantasy, there is, less rules to a certain extent as far as, uniform colours, skin tones, etc. But you still have to follow the fundamentals of great art and knowing of light and volume, etc., and textures, etc. It doesn't. Good painters, I think, will be able to paint anything. But that definitely opened up that one post-COVID, and that was where I met you, Scott, last year at MMSI. It was what I called my COVID collection. It's everything I've been painting sort of in the lockdown. I took that along, and I wanted to sort of see how it was, and would it ignite the feeling I had from the old Euro militaires of years ago? And thankfully, yes, it did. And I went to the MFCA show again this year. Done really well there as well, and just met the guys that have been around forever, the amazing talented people like you said, John Rosenkrantz. You've got Bill Horan was there. You've got some great people, like you've had Andy as well on there. It's the first time I met those guys, and Greg Silar, and there's loads. They're all like the old great names of American figure painting and modelling, and they take you in with open arms. Mike Blank from Sweden came over. I had a great chat with him because he was the most inspirational one, I feel, when I got back into it. So I just bought his book. Yeah. And that was huge. That was massive. And that really sort of set me off on a different direction. And it's changed over the last couple of years since. Sorry about that, Goff. That's a long-winded.
No, that's perfect. A couple of things that really struck me upon meeting you. First thing is your unusual San Diego accent, and it was immediately fun to talk with you about that. But like you said, I think when we talked at MMSI, you had mentioned that you have recently just kind of picked up the brushes again. And, I hopefully it wasn't too rude of me to scoop my jaw up off of the floor. But, all joking aside, what you brought, not just the quality, but the range was really incredible to see, and just enjoyed kind of getting to know you. And you're a bit, most of us, I guess, get tied to a certain genre, but you're a little bit fearless in that, hey, let's do a Roman centurion or World War I biplane, or let's do a ferry, or let's scratch built this science fiction fantasy piece. And so that was really kind of awesome to see that as I got to know you and talk to you. But I have a question. Obviously, you're really, really good at your job too. I've seen on your Facebook some of the events that you've done and the models you work with. Does your work as a stylist in sort of, different models here, right? Your work as a stylist in creating a look there, does that inform what you do with your paintbrushes on your bench as well?
Subconsciously, I've thought about this a lot. My other half, she always says I work with models, and I come home and I work with models. It's just a slightly different variety. But there is a lot of parallels in the creative industry that apply to what I'm doing or how my thought process, purely because I've applied those learning techniques to what I do now with a brush. Now, one thing I must go back to as well, which I was very fortunate, I must give this guy a mention. When I grew up in London. And funny enough, you talk about my accent has been watered down so much in the 12 years I've been here. It's crazy. I am a proper Cockney by birth, if anyone knows what that is. It's like, we do sound a bit like Dick Van Dyke in Mary Poppins, but when I go home now, my accent is nowhere near as strong as my brother's. And I was shocked when I listened to it on other podcasts. And at work, I've noticed it as well, just to get understood in the US, unfortunately. But yeah, I've lost you. I don't sound like Michael Caine anymore. But sorry, side note, that's typical stylist stuff, going sidetracked really easily. Yeah, so what I've done is applied sort of teaching methods that we have and stuff that people have been teaching in my industry for like 30 years. I've understand how do we accelerate people? How do we find something that accelerate them through the creative process? And I've tried to do that in my own learning process of, when I'm painting. And I do have a very strong feeling. I want to see people improve. Talking to other people, I said, would you mind giving advice or mentoring or whatever? I said, yeah, I've got no big body of work compared to other people. But if you see something I like, then definitely I want to see people improve. And, just stuff that I've done myself and just give myself little exercises just to improve, painting techniques. It's not a case of like, you always got to paint a figure. Like the aircraft guys always use, they talk about a mule, don't they? A paint mule, or AFE guys. And, figure painters, we can do little busts of just purely head and shoulders, etc. But just, one thing I found was very useful. I sent it out to MD scale models, just chopping up a piece of sprue, round sprue, and go from one leg to the other, practicing your blending, go from the darkest tone to the lightest and blend it in between, crosshatch, practice your dot technique to create shading on that. So, you can do that in a couple of hours in a day, and you will find your brush control improves dramatically, and you're not worried about ruining a model. It's a piece of sprue, but as long as you undercoat it, it's flat surface. Learn about volume of light on there, shade it from dark to bottom, side to side, or vice versa on top, and change your different methods of painting. I found that was really useful. That accelerated my painting process really quickly. So, and that's something we would do, in a professional environment, just using different tools, etc. And the guy I was going to mention as well, where I grew up, he was an art teacher. Reg Anker was his name. Funny enough, he was a navigator on Lancaster bombers in the World War II. So amazing guy to talk to. He didn't talk about it a lot, like most guys out of the war never did, but he would give little snippets. But what a great art teacher. And he gave me a great lesson on the colour wheel that lasted me through my school time doing art. When he saw when I had pictures painted in oils, and he rectified, because he said, like, some of the colours are getting muddy. And so this is what I see a lot of guys when they go from painting armour, they paint figures, and a lot of the colours, they disappear. There's not a sharpness to them. And understanding that colour process of, how you don't lose the saturation values in your paint, and you can really achieve great effects, even with such colours like, olive drab, khakis, greys, etc. So, hopefully that answers some of that, Scott. I could ramble on for hours about that.
No, that's what we want you to do. Grant is the figure painter here. He's the one with the talent. One of the things that I really wanted to talk with you about in your work, and there's, the different pieces, is the pieces that I really tend to just really think are stunning are the ones where you have a figure that has skin tones, flesh tones, but also metallics, because the way that you use light, like your hoplite, I think it's a hoplite, the light on the shield, or your Centurion, the light on his metal helmet, your Conan piece where you've got, he's got his great big, Arnold Schwarzenegger biceps, and then, pieces of armor, but you just see light really, really well. And I'm assuming there's a lot of practice that goes into that. Maybe kind of what's your philosophy and technique for painting light as you're going from like flesh to metal? I
wouldn't say there's a huge difference in it. It's just determining your light source. And I do like to try and find a light source at an angle as opposed to just like the straight overhead. I think it just gives it more drama. And I think that's one thing that you're looking for in a piece of, like, how do you make that pop? And then you talk to other painters. Mike Blank's a very good exponent of that. He's like, where do you draw the person's attention when you're looking at that figure? That's a very, very useful tip to do. There's one rule that I've seen before in the past. It's almost like you can paint a triangle or draw a triangle on your figure. You can go, argument's sake, he's got his right arm up and he's holding a sword. And that's a point of reference. And it goes down to the face, and then it might go down to another piece on the body. And you could draw a triangle in those 3 points. So I've used that before in the past, where it's like, it makes your eye lead on that story. It pushes the focus and it pushes the viewer around that. And so you let the other tones in the background sort of like, blend in a little bit. And then working with some really, really great painters, like in the past, we've done some painting schools down here, and some guys overseas, the Spanish boys I've worked with, they're very, very good at introducing sort of like different techniques of, you've got to understand your highlighted piece, the piece with the greatest amount of highlight to it, sometimes needs to be accentuated with the mid-tone that sits around it. So it's not a case of like the dark next to the light. Sometimes the mid-tone will make that highlight look even brighter. And I think that's where a lot of people maybe sort of like fall down a little bit. They sort of do a highlight and a dark tone, and then don't understand really what's going on in that middle transition area and how you play with that. And then you force those highlights in certain areas on the head that might catch the light the most. It might be the forehead, bridge of the nose, cheekbone. That's it. And it doesn't match your chin or whatever. And then it's the same with the metal as well. I think that's the hardest one. That's definitely been a journey. I don't think anyone's really perfects that unless you're like someone like Land Studio, worth following. That's just, I fight that one because I love what true metallics look like, and I love what non-metallic metals look like. But I think both of them are missing something. So I've tried to combine the pair of them together. I'm not the first to do that, but I just like the idea of marrying the two in certain areas. And I'll show you a figure when you're in Chicago that I've done that with. More than happy to talk about that. It'll put you to sleep.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. You're not going to put us to sleep.
Definitely not.
Yeah. What I like about your work too is the like Scott brought up, the force of light not force, but the actual light itself, and you bring it out so well in the idea of the triangle. I also want to say that the sprue idea you gave me when last time we talked in San Diego, I've been doing that. Just the cross hatching, the dots, the stuff like that. And that has helped me a lot. Anybody doesn't understand that, just try it. Take a piece of sprue, paint it, put some primer on it, and just start painting it light to dark. And that's the big thing I have a problem with is my tone. My mid-tones are not very good, not very strong. So I have to work on that a lot. You have a figure, and I can't remember the name of it. It's a female figure. It has the big metal thing on her head. Yeah. That figure, is that all metallic? Is that non-metallic metal that you did, or did you mix that with the metal itself?
No, that's all non-metallic. That's done in my water soluble oil paint, an oxymoron if ever there was one. But yeah, I did that because that was just purely from knowing how I can blend that, and on a large space, I think oils lend itself to that really well. And it's not for everybody. It's fine, but I'm a great exponent of just use whatever works. Right. To me, it's irrelevant. It's the finished effect. And so, yes, that was purely oils. And then my cheat mode, I put a tiny piece of satin varnish right up through the middle piece of the highest highlight.
Oh, wow.
Just it watered down, but just a small amount, just so it catches the light even more. So, and that was just, that's an experimental piece. That was one of those. It's like, well, let's try it. Let's just try this, see what it comes up like. And you going back to that sprue thing, and it's great to hear it. And, that's one my bone of contention when I see YouTube videos of let's paint a figure. And they all assume everyone knows, just the basic fundamental technique of applying paint correctly in a layer or a glaze. And they talk about it, but it really is, that's where my crossover from my work has been. We are very brutal in when we teach of your fundamental technique is taken down to the basics. And you do that so many times before you even worry about doing anything else, because we've got a great expression of anyone who wants to learn advanced technique. Well, it's just great basic stuff combined in different areas. That's all it is. And I've applied that to sort of the learning process. The last 2 years of figure painting is if I can cross hatch, and if I can dot blend, and if I can wet blend, and if I can, do glazes into dry, glazes into wet, etc., all those different permutations. Once you put them together, then people are like, oh, wow, that looks amazing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't easy. That's just a glaze over the top of a wet blend or whatever it might be. There's some, great painter, Eric Swinton, American painter, great fantasy painter. He talks about it on his videos. It's like, it's not a motivation as well as another one to talk about, losing your mojo. And he says, just be disciplined. Mm-hmm. And, there was a great, the guy who done all the stickmen, Lowry, that painter. And they asked him the same question. He says, well, just pick your paintbrush up and start painting. You'll be surprised. You just, even if you don't want to paint, just start painting. And I found my most productive sessions have come where, when I didn't necessarily want to paint or paint too much, and I suddenly found myself at 2 a.m. in the morning still going hard on something. So different permutations.
Yeah, and another thing I liked about that figure we just talked about, and I hate to come back to it, I'm sorry, is she had a blue scarf around her neck, and you actually carried the blue reflection up into the metal, which was very neat. I like the way that you seem to carry that color up into it. So I don't know if it was meant to be that way or it was the photography. It really turned out really well. So
I'm claiming a fluke. I don't know what I was doing at that moment in time.
But it's a hell of a fluke. So
who knows?
So let's talk a little bit about your little. And I'm going to say this because I've seen some of your World War I stuff. Your little obsession with wingnut wings in your aircraft.
I mean, where does it come from? I have a deep fascination with World War I anyway. My grandfather, who served in both World Wars, but he was in the Navy in World War I. He was at the Battle of Jutland, the biggest naval battle in World War I.
Wow.
Not many people claim that. And he definitely talked about it a lot to my dad, and who drew it into us. And it was very, just having a lot of family members that were involved in that as well. And, I've been to the World War I sites all over France and Belgium. I think it's such a shame that it was losing its glamour to a lot of the modelling fraternity, etc., over a period of time. But when we had the centenary, and I managed to come back to the UK, and I had all the poppies around the Tower of London, it really did sort of strike a chord then, and I wanted to sort of look into it a little bit more. And it was just time and place, picking the brushes up again and finding that. And I've always had a love of the World War I aircraft. There's something very sort of romantic about them and the characters that flew them. And because they're just so flimsy and ridiculous looking, how the hell do they even get up in the air? But I've always wanted to sort of like think, if there was a kit that really did them justice, they would be interesting to do. And it's just time and place, falling by luck and or Wingnut Wings kit. Unfortunately, got out of business, but it's Copper State as well. Do some amazing ones. I've got a Cauldron on the go for those as well. And the scale of them as well, 1/32. I mean, how perfect scale to marry figures into an aircraft. And I love that. I love the guys like Andy and Greg who do like these little vignettes of vehicles and figures. And I've always thought, well, what if I managed to sort of eventually get your skill base up high enough that I can marry up a really interesting vignette of an aircraft with figures. It could have horses in, because you've got that period in time where you've got cavalry running around with tanks and stupid aircraft that are made out of bits of timber and linen. I just think it's got all those fabrics, and I've managed to sort of incorporate figure painting techniques into painting the aircraft as well, because it's relevant because of that fabric being on a plane. It's SE5 I've got on the go now, and it's to sort of do figure painting shading on some of the fabric. So it's
some of those update pictures of the SE5 you've been posting on the Posse. That's the comment I was going to make is, the way you render the fabric on the aircraft, it really is almost like more of a figure painting style. And it really works. Like you're mentioning, the machines are basically kites with a motor and a machine gun, and the fabric of the woods, those are very organic figure kinds of materials. And I think you really, really bring those out the way that you paint.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's just say it's an ongoing process. I look at plenty of other guys who build those planes. There's a great modeler in the UK, David Lane, he's a phenomenal figure painter and aircraft builder, World War One. Mm-hmm. Very different style. He's very, maybe doesn't mind me saying, he's got a beautiful, like what I call a restrained way of painting. And I admire that, but it's just that's not how I want to paint. And so I look at it and I love seeing his stuff. And he's a World War One aircraft nut and figure painter just like myself. So it was sort of a brother from another mother almost when I saw his work. It was just really interesting to see. So I'm happy to give him a shout out.
You mentioned different materials that you work with. I mean, I guess when you're approaching your work, is it more of, I really want to use acrylics, or I really want to use oils, or whatever? Or do you have kind of a process that you like to follow for the most part? Or is it just subject by subject?
Yeah, unfortunately, having a brain working in my industry, we jump around so quick. A lot of figures, it will be you paint them in your head for quite a while before I actually get them in front of me. So I had one figure I got recently. I don't know if I posted it anywhere. I posted it on Small Subjects, and it's a futuristic bust of a girl with got a huge skull on her head, a bird skull on her head, and feathers. And I painted that in my head probably for 2 weeks before I actually received it. And I knocked that out in a weekend. And that's almost like I managed to paint that subconsciously. That's a very funny thing to say, but I think that runs hand in hand with how we've taught in my industry. Like, you can do something very, very quickly when you've run it around your head for a lot. So using different materials, oils, acrylics, it will just be a case of what I feel that material needs. And sometimes there is a crossover. I've just painted a musket for a figure, and I've done the acrylics all on the wood stock, and then I've run oil straight over the top because, that's another thing with speed as well. The oils won't affect the acrylic underneath, so I can go straight over the top of it in one day, and vice versa. Sometimes I might do large skin tones with oils, but then I'll go back with acrylics a day or so later because that gives me the sharpness that I might need. And then I'll play around with the water-based oils as well. When you use them for a day and let them dry off, you can then put water in them, and they behave very similar to an acrylic in how you can detail with them. But the beauty of it is, you make a mistake, you can take it off really easily. And I love that. It's it's when you're doing like little tiny lines and details, etc. Very, very useful to have that ability to still remove that with a bit of water. You're not putting any spirits or whatever on your figure or a vehicle. It's a nice fail-safe. And playing around with them as well. I think the World War One planes, I found a lot of cases were using them over the top of the paint without putting a varnish layer. Gives me a different effect as opposed to using a varnish, because I don't want that paint to carry across the fabric. I actually want it to sort of like go in the sponge effect, draw some of the paint in, and then I've got to work really hard to spread it, but it's giving me much more of like a little fabric look to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, varying the look of paint by using varnishes and not using varnishes. That's really interesting. It's like you mentioned putting the sheen in the big hat on the sci-fi lady. That was a nice little touch. You recently did I don't know if she's a historical figure. I should know this, but a lady with a purple dress kind of staring at a skull.
Yeah.
And the purple pleats on her dress and the hair. I mean, it's kind of I think a smaller piece, but it's amazing the detail and highlights that you put into that. Is that like an acrylic piece or oils or kind of a combination of all of the above? Or
yeah, all the above. You've got on the hair was all acrylic. The skin was a mixture, and the dress was acrylic underbase with an oil over the top, purely just to push the highlight in a dry state. That I could do that, because if you look at satin in real life, satin and silk, it has a very, very strong highlight, almost virgin on white. So, if you do that wet, it can look, or maybe with just pure acrylic, it could look a little bit flat, and I wanted to force that really up. So I knew if I go back in and do what I call like the second round of highlighting with a tiniest amount of lilac tone in the white, it could push that highlight even more. So it's got much more of a reflective note to it. I've done a very similar technique on a bust I've just finished of Amelia Earhart as well on a scarf. So, you'll see that in a couple of weeks as well, I'm sure.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, you just brought up a very good point that I want to bring up, is the second highlight, the idea of a second highlight. Can you talk about your process for that? I know I've read in Mike Blank's book, he does a little bit of that, but is that just can you walk us through that? Is it just a hit of color? Is it more of an attacking of it just to bring it up higher, or what's your process for that?
Yeah, I suppose. So if you're painting in acrylics, you're going to go to your strongest highlight and sort of decrease the area that you're going to. Argument's sake, we're just doing a single fold in fabric. You find out where your point of light is most reflective. Then what is that fabric? What's it made of? So let's argument's sake, it's on this. We're saying it's silk. Mm-hmm. It's going to have the strongest highlight. It's going to have that strongest bounce factor as opposed into light, because that's the illusion we want to create. And because we're painting and we've got that luck that we can force it and make it not real to a certain extent. Sometimes the paint, or even around the mid-tone around it, it doesn't quite come off doing it like the first time round. Mm. And you can't go into pure white as a highlight sometimes, and you can't come from such a dark to light as well. So having a look at it 2 days later, whatever, a day later, with fresh eyes, then you can come in and I pick out very, very deliberate areas, but not the whole lot of it. It might be a very, very point on the crease where it's interacting with something else. It might just you might have to put in a sharp line to sort of put a barrier in between dark and light, and just little things like that. So I wouldn't say it comes naturally. I think it's a learned process, but just understanding where you want to make that pop a little bit and force the viewer to have a look at that area.
Right.
Will just help. Yeah, definitely.
Do you do that? We talked about silks and different materials that, have a higher sheen. Would you do that kind of more of a highlight with a drab, like a uniform from a World War I pilot? Would you go back in again and do a second harder highlight again? Or
yeah, I've done that. I've done that on the leathers on the pilot. I painted purely because leather is hugely reflective.
Yes,
and
yes,
to make that believable. So I've done that deliberately. Yeah, I think it would just depend on, the setting of the there's another thing as well. What's the story you're telling? Now, what's the situation? What's the light that character is in? Is he in early morning, dusk, or, the sunrise, or is it like bright sunshine, summer? And I think, I love the films of Ridley Scott where everything's desaturated. It's a very low light he always uses. It's almost like autumnal. And so the sci-fi figure I painted with a little vehicle that Scott was touching on, I wanted to have the light concentrated at very much almost like a eye level. It's the light's coming in on a horizontal plane as opposed to being from above. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's just trying things like that. I just said before, I don't buy into too much of it's always got to come from the same source. We've always got to use that technique of, let's varnish it, pin wash it, go back. And that is just, those sort of, formulaic. I think you've got to break those formulas sometimes to change it. And you've got to find your own style. I think that's the main thing. There's a great quote I had from a painter recently is like, well, we've done a painting class and everyone's painting the actual bust and they all look very similar to the person who's teaching the class. But then it just becomes a worse version of that person who's teaching and not your own version. So you've got to then go away and modify it a bit and make it your own. I think some people can be a little bit scared of doing that and finding their own style. It's like, well, that person's tank wins all the shows. I must paint my tank like that one to win. I just think I think you're just losing a little bit of your own creativity, maybe. But not everyone thinks the same. Not everyone has the same brain, so and everyone gets out of modelling what they want. So yeah, each to their own, which is fair enough. But I would prefer to, at some point, not listen to anyone and just make the mistakes. And I've got plenty of those sitting around. There's plenty of paints that they look, especially when I first started painting, they look disgusting. But I just thought that was part of the necessary process. You've got to do it.
Yeah.
If you want to push it.
That's a really good point about the way people learn. And, we at IPMS Nationals, we did a kind of a base class with Rick Lawler, and that was his approach. Instead of him building and showing and talking about what he was doing, he was like, nope, everybody sit down. We had a big, huge conference room table. He's like, there's all the elements, get started. And then he would go around and sort of collaborate and coach and say what he liked and maybe make suggestions. But it was very much a focus on encouraging people to be themselves, like what you're talking about, be yourself. And I think from a learning perspective, there's a lot of value in that approach rather than replicating somebody else's work verbatim, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes human nature, isn't it? We all like to be part of tribes, I suppose, and you've got to sometimes, if you wanted to, just break out of that and just change your eye. But I think I've got just a clear idea of what I want to paint like. I've said that before on the small subjects. It's quite a weird thing, I think, sometimes to sort of say that. But I look at other painters and I admire them massively, but I don't want to do a version of mine to look like that. I'm trying to find something else. And, this is just, as someone else touched on it recently in the fantasy world, it's just like, what's your journey? Where are you at? It's not a sprint. It's irrelevant whether or not I'm painted a gold medal standard today and I'm a silver tomorrow. Sometimes I've got to go backwards to go forwards. That's just the way it is. It's just, it might work, it might not. But, we weren't done when we were figure painting 30 years ago. We all thought that was the highlight of it all. But then standards have just gone up and have got better and better ever since anyway. So who knows where the top of the mountain is, but we just keep on trying to find it.
Well, that's another great point is that, we all have that inner artist inside of us, I believe. And TJ and JB and the others in the group here really do believe that, I think, and that you manage that and you improve that by each subject, by each thing you build. And it definitely shows in your work that you're reaching levels, and then you change your style a little bit. And I don't mean that disrespectfully or anything like that, that you change a little bit something and it just pops, and you see that in your work, which is very impressive to me. I try to be a figure painter and learn stuff. That's the key word, is a try. And I see, when we talked in San Diego, I was very impressed by, and I'll tell you what it was, is I was looking at your cell phone, you were showing me some pictures of your World War I figures, and there was something there and I couldn't figure it out but it was the subtle tone you used for color to bring out the light, and you had them all on the line and there were different angles of the light, and I didn't notice it at first until you mentioned it to me. And that was one of the things you do really well, and that's very, very impressive to me, that you can find that light and you can find the direction. And I'm actually kind of interested to see, and there's a question in here, I promise, that you talk about your sci-fi diorama where the light is coming straight at the person, which is very unique. I don't think I've ever seen too many models where the light is coming straight at the person. So are you doing, I can't remember the name of the style is, where you paint the figure all black and then you put a shot of white onto it. You shoot a white so you know where the highlights are if you're looking. Do you do stuff like that, or the Zenithal highlights?
Yeah, that's definitely a basic Zenithal highlight system.
There you go. That's right.
There you go. Yeah, but I will definitely, from purely like the coaching I've done with other painters, like I say, I haven't done loads, but I've done enough that I love the fact that, the idea of sketching out your whole color scheme or sketching out your light source beforehand is really important. So you go in there the first time round, and I think that's hard. That's a very hard thing to do with figures when you're first starting to do figures. I struggle with that initially, like, sketching, and it is a rough sketch of like where you want that figure to pop the most. Mm-hmm. And, you go and improve that, because the Zenithal is a spraying technique generally, isn't it? Or people sometimes dry brush over the top.
Right. Yeah.
But it is it's to a certain extent, it can be a little bit hit and miss in, like, it gives you a great base of it, but then you take a little step back and go, okay, right, I want this to really come out and I want that to disappear. And then you can go in and you can force the figure, and the sketching process allows you then to see if it's going to work, or if you just need to pull out more areas and stuff like that. I think that's definitely a learning process. I've done one with the light coming from below as well. It's another one. It's another good exercise to do is, change your light source, and, suddenly you've got shadows where highlights would be. There's another way. Permutations are endless, but definitely, yeah, in answer to your question, it's not just always zenithal. I don't think it does enough. I have to go back in and sort of do more. And that was purely forced by another figure painter got me doing that.
When you're doing different exercises in light, I mean, are you just relying on the data bank up here that you build up through the years, or do you grab a photograph of a person or a book and see something that inspires you? Really interested in that.
Well, I'll show you something on here actually, Scott. So I've done a figure painting class for some people, and I took this along. You see that?
Okay, yeah, like geometric shapes and shading and light. Yeah.
So they've got all the light sources on that. So I just showed that to everyone, and basically, if you look at that, your sphere is the same shape as a head. Your cylinders are an arm or a leg. Your cube is a body. So if you understand that and you've got that as a fail-safe, you can always go back, and that helps with painting non-metallics, etc., and things like that. But yes, reference pictures might sort of like kick it off, something I've seen out in the real world. Like, that looks interesting. Maybe I'll try and capture that. But I've just come back from a trip in Europe working. I was at the museum in Paris, the Army Museum, Les Invalides as well. And I probably took more pictures of the actual paintings in there than I did of actually the military this time around. And I thought that was quite telling of where my interest was. I wanted to see where some of the great painters like Detail and where they forced light on armor and stuff like that. I think that was it's just a great way of finding not only inspiration but really understanding. I know they're painting on a 2-dimensional thing, but we are definitely stealing some of their techniques to do on a 3-dimensional subject. And out of interest, I've tried it on my SE5 as well. I've got the light source from One Direction. Whether or not it comes out, we'll have to see when you see it.
Well, I would say so far, well done for sure. I want to go back to storytelling for a minute, if that's okay. That picture we were talking about, the bust of the lady with the purple silk dress and holding the skull. You seem to be really good at using very subtle elements to tell a story. It's just a bust, but yet if you look at the skull in her hand and then the very powdery, chalky makeup of the time on her face, little things like that. And then you mentioned the highlights in the dress. Is that something that you draw inspiration from other pieces that you see, or is that just kind of a combination of what inspires you in general? I mean, how do you translate that into such subtle but effective ways of adding to the story of each individual piece?
I call that one a cheat mode. That one's I've just reproduced something that I've done in my professional life quite a few years ago. I've had to recreate that sort of Marie Antoinette look for work, for photo shoots. And I've been lucky enough, I've been around the makeup artists that are applying the makeup. So I know where that goes and how it looks, what it looks like. And then, everything else, how the photographers have lit the shot, just fallen back on that one. So that was, it wasn't an easy one to do, but it was definitely what I fell back on doing that one. It was just, I don't know, maybe I'll just carry on painting women's faces. It just seems to be a bit easier because of, the background I've been working in with so many makeup artists. They're a sort of different genre in themselves. You can't paint a female face the same as a male one. You make them look too old. You can't put the same level of contrast in them. But yeah, that's probably the best answer I can give you on that one, Scott.
No, that's very good. And that kind of, I guess the second part of that question is what really want to kind of get into what inspires Gary. You've been around some very, very beautiful people. You've been around some very beautiful locations. You mentioned from an early age, you've been in a lot of museums. You've been exposed to a lot of art, but what really, really inspires you? What makes you think, oh, wow, that's amazing. I want to incorporate that into my painting and my modeling.
I think it's like the art in general, and certain photographers as well have managed to do that. There's certain sort of like really good portrait photographers I've worked with in the past that play around with light, and so that gives you a great source for inspiration of like, how do you capture that? Because, there's historical people will always moan about, the shade of that uniform's not correct. Well, the shade of a uniform is going to look different in the middle of February in the wet and the mud with no sunshine and a grey overcast sky compared to what it's going to look like in the height of summer with bright sunshine, surely. So, go down that road. And I think that really is the inspiration of that is just capturing moments And the light thing is always probably going to be a big thing for me. I've got an amazing book. I must find it. It's a fantasy book, but it's an amazing book on light. And I think, if anyone's really serious about this stuff and really wants a great read, I'll give you that. And you can paste it under your podcast notes. I'll send it over to you. It's a great one.
That would be great. That would be great.
It's incredible. So that's probably the biggest inspiration, and also never being satisfied with what you're doing. I think that helps a huge amount. It's really frustrating, but we're all our own worst critics most of the time, and never thinking, well, that's all right, but wish I'd have done that, and I wish I'd have done that. Let's get on to the next one. That's probably like the highest motivation I've got. I think that was the same in the work environment. I've been like that throughout my whole working life, and it's just carried on the same. It's irrelevant what I've done. It's like, what's the next? Let's see it and force it. And I think was it Chris Meddings talked about this before in the past on a previous podcast on their show, and applying that to a vehicle. I mean, I've often thought about that. Can you imagine having a Tiger tank in the snow, but the only bit of sunshine he's going to have, because it's low light winter, is purely top of the turret and the tank commander. Everything else can be in shadow, because that would happen in the early hours of the morning. And I think, I think sometimes armor modelers, maybe they just need to be a bit braver, maybe myself included on that one, proof of the pudding, shut up and do it yourself. I think it's a great concept to do. It'd be really interesting, to pull that off.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, there's that idea of a tank cresting a hill or something, going up and getting that first rays of sunlight, hitting the front of the vehicle, hitting the high points on that vehicle only. It would be a great idea with the low tones, something to that effect, where it's just hitting the face, like, another straight on shot, or hitting the high tones. I think that would be an interesting experiment, a very interesting try to be done with that. I really want to go back to one more thing we talked about earlier too, is that you said what I found really interesting is that you paint the figure in your head before you actually do it. Do you do that with all your figures, or is that just you do? So it's more of a planning process for you, or is that your planning process, or is it just? No,
I think it's an inherent trait. We have a massive visualization process in our industry. If we're looking after a client, we visualize what we're going to do. We don't necessarily follow it out, but we visualized it within 2 minutes. And it's the same process. I probably can't function without doing that. I've got to visualize everything.
Yeah, that's for me, that's very interesting, because, I have nothing to do with the industry you're in. And mine is an industry of, putting things together, engineering and stuff like that. So I don't see it that way. And it's a great idea for a figure painter to try, is just do it all in your head first and then attack it. That's a great skill to have, I guess.
I do it with vehicles and planes as well, in certain respects, like color schemes and stuff, because, it's just like, you're not going to start a journey in your car without having a map. So, that helps give yourself some direction opposed to going in blind. That's where I don't like the idea of very formulaic, paint it, undercoat it, whatever it might be, zenith or highlight, or if I'm on a vehicle, it's like paint it, panel line it, varnish it, weather it. Well, what if I don't do that? And what if I go back and do something else? And, don't follow that rule book, don't follow that guideline. There might be some interesting cock up with some paint that creates a really interesting effect.
Right.
And I've got that on a couple of pieces that I've done recently, because I've just been playing around with the paint, and it's, I've either tried to scrub the paint off but left it, and it's actually worked really well. You shouldn't be painting like that, but it actually has worked. So that's just what I call Bob Ross, isn't it?
Happy trees.
Happy trees, happy mistake or whatever.
Happy mistake, Yeah, sometimes it's not what you take off or leave on, isn't it? It's just those little bits separate it. But develop a good visualization process. But that's definitely a hang up from my industry. Everyone has got to have that process before they start.
I think it enhances your modeling. I mean, it's obviously a valuable method. Are you either amateur or professionally? Are you a photographer or a painter?
No, I'll paint and draw quite happily still. If someone said to me if I could give up work tomorrow and do nothing, I would just be a recluse living in a little cottage, just painting and drawing. Definitely, that would be it. I'd happily paint anything if it stood still long enough. Furniture. I've got my desk, funny enough, which is on the other side of the room here. The very first one I've used, because I've got two desks now. But when I started the hobby, I've outgrown it. But I painted that as well when I got it. I bought it on, I don't know, Craigslist, and went around the house for $20 and painted it all, make it look like an old antique. Just a frustrated painter, Scott. That's all I'm ever going to be.
Well, please continue being frustrated.
Yeah.
I want to, we've talked, a little bit about obviously a lot of busts and figures. I want to talk about another skill that you're really, really good at, which is scratch building and sculpting. One of your pieces that you've done, I really like, is you have a female, probably like almost like an anime fantasy figure with a sci-fi sled. And, there it is. Assassin. That's the one.
I'm working on it. I'm still doing adding some bits to it. Yeah, go on. Carry on.
Yeah. So, walk us through that a little bit. What was your inspiration? Is that something that just kind of popped in your head? And, how'd that come about? It's a really, I've got pictures of it in the raw form where you just showed us on camera the finished piece. But yeah.
It's definitely a combination of the figure first. The figure is actually an elf, but I saw it. I was just like, I want to convert that. I just want to convert it into something, and I wanted to resculpt it. So, but I just felt, going back to, like you say, you had Andy Golden on the last episode of just like, he does all those little vignettes. And I just think that combination of combining a really nicely made vehicle or something with a really well painted figure adds something. And as I said before, as you guys said, I don't want to be stuck down one genre. That personality trait of mine, I don't want to be. So yeah, I wanted to marry the two together, and that figure, I just felt I could see it. Once again, that visualization process, like I saw how I wanted it to look, and I have that vibe of Dune, Star Warsy type of vibe to it, the uniform colors and everything else, very muted color scheme on it, as opposed to anything bright. And then so I just went about chopping her up, sculpting the hood, cloak, boots, arms, giving her a droid's hand on her right hand. You won't be able to see that in the picture. And then the vehicle started off, funny enough, at the back end of a Tamiya field kitchen. That's where the basics came from. And I had the sled pieces are from another kit, and then just various amounts of plastic hard tubing, wire, just to bulk it up and just convert some of the weapons. Now she's got a triple-barreled shotgun on it as well at the back end of it. Just use some plastic cards to make the holder on that, bits of foil for straps. So yeah, that went together pretty quick as well. I just found I just got all the bits of kits that I had lying around, some old Star Wars stuff and some other Bandai bits, and just played around with them. And that all you're looking for is to create something, I suppose, that's visually looks right. Scale wise, yeah, she just about fits in it. She could be riding over the sand dunes on that. So yeah, it was just a good bit of fun. If it didn't work, what's the worst can happen? I throw the vehicle away and just use the figure.
I really like the picture, the raw picture before the paint that shows how you've resculpted her arm and added the fur around her hood and the face covering to keep the dust out of her. And it just looks terrific. Yeah,
well, that was a screw up, Scott. So I did the initial bit. I gave her a little mask. I don't know whether that was a COVID thing. I gave her a little mask, like a little breathing apparatus, and it just didn't look right. It didn't go with the rest of the cloak. And I just thought, well, the wind is forcing the cloak. It's now forcing the fur. I can put a scarf on her face and push it in the same direction. And the beauty of that, I've got rid of virtually a whole load of skin tone to paint, haven't I? So it's easier painting a scarf than opposed to painting a face.
I only have a few figures I've collected, but so far I have one hard and fast rule. The figure must have a complete helmet, no face, no face showing.
That's an interesting thought for you. I want to sort of highlight that. What I find interesting about our hobby, I see so many people always comment about other people's, they're at a level, and I could never do that. And I find that very unusual, purely because from the industry I come in, we're very vocal about trying to not let them think about that, because I think it was a psychologist I met years ago, and it was like they were a client just from purely of, meeting in my job, you meet so many interesting people. And they said, I never forget it. People become, by and large, 98% of the time what they think of themselves. So if you're sitting there thinking, I'll never be able to paint to that level, you probably never will. But if you don't, you think, well, I'm going to try and get there. You might not get there, but at least you're going to vastly improve probably what level you're painting at. I mean, if you're happy where you are, fine. But I just find that comment comes up so many times. I don't know whether people just try and downplay themselves a little bit, but I just think, why not say, well, I'm on a journey. I'm going to push this as far as I can. I'm going to try and get there, as opposed to thinking, well, I'll never be able to paint like that. So you're just settling, or you just, it's not a derogatory comment, but I just find it very interesting. I would love to sort of sit down with those people and say, come on, let's just show you, let's give you the tools to improve that. Let's give you a chance to maybe improve on what you're doing.
Yeah, TJ was kind of leading us in a discussion a couple of days ago about that exact thing. You know, his point was, look, Wayne Gretzky, Michael Jordan, they weren't born Wayne Gretzky and Michael Jordan. There was an awful lot of repetition and hard work and practice that led to them being the greatest, them being the greatest in their sport or whatever. And his kind of thing was, he doesn't believe that it's an inherent born in natural talent as much as you've been willing to put in the work. That was kind of his posit in the conversation.
Yeah, there's definitely two trains of thought, isn't there? You can be born with a huge amount of talent, but if you don't work at it, it just becomes stale and it doesn't go anywhere. And there's someone without the talent works super hard every day and surpasses them. I think art or having an artistic eye helps in our modelling, fraternity. But I always found it interesting when I went to the first IPMS meetings. The guys generally, and I think that's why I started my figure painting group, they would always, and it's not, derogatory remarks to them, but they always talk about the build and the mark of the model, the year it came out, the changes in it. And it was all very much from like an engineering perspective. And I would just stand up and talk about my figure, and I'm talking about it or a vehicle completely from a painting perspective, irrelevant of when it came out. And, as much as I love doing the research on the planes, etc., I find just from a personal perspective, I am way more drawn to the paint and the finish as opposed to the general, I want to build that mark because the antenna was different to the kit, and that was it.
Right. Yeah, I'm in the same boat that you are. I find it, and it's no disrespect to the groups and the stuff around where I live, is that it's more of a general, this is how it was. It was, painted this way. That's the way it is, kind of, like you said, an engineering point of view. And I think that's, in a way, that's right in some points. But to get more out of what you do in your model, I think you have to take that next step and see it. How does it look in this kind, like you talked about how a uniform looks or a vehicle looks in winter than it does in the summer. It looks different in trees than it looks in desert. It looks, different because of, just the natural effects of light and weather and stuff like that. So I think that's lost a lot in some parts of this hobby. But I think if you try, and I like to try and do like you do, is try and find that different little niche. And I think that's why I'm drawn to sci-fi, is that I can do that. And when someone says, oh, it's not like that, I'm like, well, prove it, and so, and it's kind of egotistical a little bit in a way, but, I really like that idea, and when you have your groups, like you have the painting groups in San Diego, do you push that idea as much as possible with those, or do you find that people come to those meetings with that idea?
No, it's a free-for-all. It literally is a sit down, bring your figure, you're painting on, you want to paint, and then we sit down for like 3 to 4 hours, and you just get stuck into it, and you're doing whatever you like, because it's just a creative process, and you walk around and you have a look at what everyone's doing, and you might be, oh, that's a great color scheme. I've never even thought about you doing that. It's just everyone to feed off each other, really. And I find that was the difference. It was, as I say, once again, no disrespect to the IPMS meeting, but it was a show and tell meeting. It was a classic one of their formula. But I always thought, but I want to really see something going on in operation, except for, and I always say it's time. So, the idea is we don't have a fixed time when we finish. It's just a case of when we feel like we've done enough, and it will just be, just sit down and paint, and let's just see what's coming. If someone has a problem, I'm having a problem with this bit, say, how would you do that? It's, I think it's just a nice bounce around for ideas, and hopefully it's going to carry on sort of growing. We've had some great painting classes there now. We've got a couple lined up for next year of some just amazing figure painters who want to come over and teach that. I'll be expecting your good self to be down there.
I will. I got stuck on a show on the last one, but I will definitely be down there.
Yeah, it's open to anyone. Paint whatever you like. Doesn't matter if it's a wargaming figure or a huge bust or, Boba Fett or whatever in 1/12 scale. It doesn't matter. It's just, it's throwing paint on it. Just get your paintbrush on. I think that's a great thing. Like you see the really good painters, they're not worried about how they throw the paint on a figure. And I think that just happens over a period of time, and the paints you use and things like that. I've changed the paints I use as well now. I mean, anyone who's interested, I think the best lesson I ever had, Scott was talking about flesh tones and stuff like that and metals. I don't use any standard flesh tones anymore. I've given up on that quite a while ago. It's like I make my own. You just use your primary colours, use yellow, red, create a nice orange, put some blue in it, and you can lighten it with a tiny bit of white, and you're good to go. You can just get all your permutations out of that. And it's the same with a lot of your uniforms. I'm just using, I don't know if anyone interested, I use the heavy body acrylics a lot of the time now. They're vibrant, so they have just so much more pigment in them than some of the standard like bottle acrylics, like the Liquitex or the Golden. They've got a great sale on at the moment in, I think it was in Michael's. You could buy them 2 for 1 or whatever. Wow. So yeah, just switched over to a lot of those, because once again, you don't have to be told by a paint company, you've got to use this color and you've got to use that color and you've got to highlight it with this color and you've got to highlight it with that color and shade it with this one. It's great. I think when you first start, it'll give you confidence, but to push it onto another level, just like learn your color wheel and then start pushing the damn paint around and put it on. Just slap it on there, see what you got.
When you went to MMSI or when you go to MFCA or wherever, what inspires you, Gary? I mean, when you see a piece, what is it that makes you stop and notice it and really take note and maybe want to do something similar?
That's a great question. General, it's always what is maybe like the eye-catching stuff initially. You go around, I do like what I call like the first scan. Go around and you see the obvious pieces that really do stand out, and then ask yourself, okay, why is that standing out? Okay, it's like an interesting piece they've done or whatever. The detail on it is the one that's popped out of the face. Face painting obviously is a huge one. Why does that face look so much better than the others next to it, etc., or whatever it might be? Or I've got a figure like that and I want to see their approach. I think that's a huge one, is like just seeing the different approaches, color schemes. And then, just go around and you might see the surprising ones. You might see a little 54mm figure. It's been done so subtly, but quite perfect. You'd be like, that's great as well. And I think it is really the case of, it's just the different approaches of, give every painter in that room the same figure. No one's going to paint it the same. So, it's the guys I love to sort of follow on social media and all the rest of it. I don't want to paint the same as them, but I want to see how they paint it and what their approach was, definitely. I don't know, is that a good enough answer? I don't know.
That's a really good answer for sure.
The conversations as well. Have a sit down, have a conversation with Greg DeFranco, Mike Blank, any of these people. You'll get more in 5 minutes out of them than you will do talking to a know-it-all for 20 minutes. It's just great advice. Very honest as well. You can pull. That's the thing about those shows. You can pull the people over. You haven't got to worry about the judges. The judges become irrelevant. Pull those guys over that you admire and say, what do you think of the piece? How do you think I can improve it? And they will give you that time without any shadow of doubt. And I think that was when the very first question we kicked the show off, and we were talking about that was what I grew up in. Doing Euromilitaire and stuff like that. I didn't have any history of IPMS in the UK. It's very, very minimal here, and without sort of rubbing salt into a wound after what's gone on, I don't know if I'll actually pursue it either after what's happened this summer. But yeah, it's just I like the idea of probably more of just showing off work, and I couldn't give a rat's ass if it's in a competition or not. To be honest, I think
it's more about collaboration and inspiration, really, for you.
Yeah, definitely, because it's a very solitary hobby, isn't it? We sit around our little rooms, bent over a desk, and that feeling you always get. Everyone says, "Oh, when you go to the shows, it's the people," because we're suddenly let loose, and you're talking to like-minded people, and there's some great excitement about some piece you've done or something you've seen, and that's what feeds us for the next bit. There's your greatest amount of inspiration, is like looking at someone else's piece, and you're going to see some great converted scratch-built stuff there. Is it Doug Cohen? He's the American Civil War piece. The speed he puts them out is ferocious. Like, it's just that's crazy. Like, so sit down and talk to him about sculpting for half an hour, or Mike Blank. There's some seminars that people will do there. It's just, there's your inspirational stuff. I think I'll just sit down on James Rice. He's great. I have great chats with him. And I haven't met any of these people until like last year. And, just on the back end of doing 2 shows, you just got some great conversations and great interaction with them. They're priceless.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about MMSI and the other figure groups is that you put your name on the figure. Your name is visible. You can see it on the piece of paper. And so who to go talk to. You go, hey, I want to go see, can you introduce me?
They give you a name badge as well. You walk around with your name on.
Yeah, so that's the thing is that, who you want to see. Like Doug Cohen, a great example. I knew who he was because I'm a big fan of his work. And the guy is like on light speed, because the guy puts out stuff like you would believe, like you said. But I met him at Nationals this year. was great. I talked to him for 5 minutes, maybe at the most, and talking about how he does figures and what he uses to when he sculpts his figures and how he sculpts them. And it was like a 5-minute talk at the most. And I probably learned more in that 5 minutes than I did in a lot of conversations I had at that show. But I think that's a great idea that these shows do, is they give you a name badge, and then they put your name is actually visible on the stuff. So if I want to learn from Gary Clark, I go find Gary Clark and I say, hey, how did you do this? And I think that's a very important aspect of the learning process.
Yeah. I think I can go back to Scott's question about what's inspiring as well. There's definitely one thing I look for is I look at a figure, and sometimes you think, okay, I can see how that's been done. I can understand how that's been painted. I've got no idea how they painted that. I must find out how they painted that. What is the process they've used? And probably that's a huge inspirational thing as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I also really like how the shows, for me at least, I haven't been to a lot of these, but, when I went to MMSI, it was really striking how things that, as I don't want to say traditional, that's the wrong way, as guys who build tanks and airplanes mostly at IPMS and AMP shows, we tend to want to eliminate brush marks, but yet brush marks, when used correctly, can really add to the look of a piece and make it really vibrant and really come across and make kind of an emotional impact. And you don't get to see that at vehicle-based shows. How about if I say that?
No, absolutely. I've got a couple of figures. I've got that on where I've deliberately painted in a very rough style for that fabric. I've done something on the aircraft as well, just because that's the effect I wanted to sort of achieve. So yeah, it's a massively valid point. And there's some schools and there's some painters out there who don't want to paint with perfect blends and all the rest of it. They want to achieve a very, very different vibe or story. It's all valid, isn't it? I mean, it's all part of the painting process. And I think that's where the hobby gets pushed further along in the future.
Yeah, agreed. And that's also where I think it tends to skew, and it's been skewing this way, I think, for a while, but tends to skew more towards art. The old, is this a craft or is this art? Well, I think a lot of it
I think you've got to mention as well, like the other shows that, that will not get a huge mention on sort of the traditional podcasts, like the Nova Open up in Washington. He's going to probably be a very, very big figure show. It's very heavily fantasy based, but I think the potential of that Adepticon is already huge in its own right. It's a gaming show, but then obviously going to Europe, which next year I'll fully plan going to SMC where the boys are going, and I definitely Monte San Savino in Italy is definitely on the radar. Just from I suppose it's just I want to go back to my European roots and go and do a couple of European shows just to get that vibe back what I was used to. Yeah, definitely. I think there's a huge area there, I say, with the fantasy shows that's not tapped into by traditional painters, that they should do themselves a favour. Go and have a look, because there's a huge wealth of talent in there that doesn't even cross over into the traditional side of our hobby.
Yeah, there's another big show it's going to be more, it's getting bigger and bigger. It's called ReaperCon, which is another sci-fi show. It is very, I believe it's in Texas, and it's another one of those shows that people are I think it's going to get bigger and bigger as a figure show. Nova, like you said, is another great one. I've seen that show, and that's impressive. I'm going to head to Wonderfest this year, which is more of a sci-fi kind of show, stuff like that. And that's another one I think they can get more into the more mainstream and help people learn the process too, is that show.
Yeah, the volume of workshops they do at those fantasy painting shows is phenomenal. There's so many going on to help people improve their painting. The one in the Las Vegas Open as well, that's in January. Another great one to go to. A huge amount of workshops they do there, like 3 days long. All worthwhile.
Well, Gary, what's next for you? I mean, is there a new genre or a piece that you would really like to do? Or maybe, you mentioned kind of wanting to start to do maybe more vignettes or dioramas, but what's next for you as an artist, as a modeler?
Yeah, I mean, the whole process has been like that. Yeah, push the painting. Well, concentrate on my painting first, and then start developing the sculpting side of it. And as I say, I've done everything organically. I'm not trying to force anything, but just naturally, just converting figures. I've got stuff now that I'm just chopping all up, and more than happy to scratch build those pieces. So hopefully, further down the line, I want to incorporate some heavily converted, if not scratch built stuff on a more of a regular basis. If I can draw myself away from buying so many damn figures and World War I aircraft, that is. But I've just got a natural fascination with the sculpting side of it. So who knows where that will go? But I would actually like to do something on the teaching aspect as well. I'm going to throw that out there now, purely because I just think it's a huge hole in how we teach things within the hobby. And I'm just relating it to how we teach in my industry. And, you know, there's with social media and everything else that you can do, creating digital libraries and just how we can improve that. I think there's definitely holes in the market. I'd love to, argument's sake, I'd love to do a class just helping guys painting figures who do AFV modelers, getting them up to a nice stat, getting the fear out of painting a Tamiya figure. You know, how do you improve a Tamiya figure? You know, cut all the collars off the jackets. Let's put something in the pockets, resculpt a little bit, just give it something. It's like the guys on my ground crew, I've fluffed out the pockets because he's got a rag shoved in it. Little things like that just can make it look human. I think that's what we're looking for in figures with AFVs, planes, etc., is to give that human element, as opposed to them all just standing there by posing for a photograph, pointing off to some imaginary objects in the distance, which is the majority of figures you see that are sitting on tanks and all the rest of it. You know, the human form does a lot more than just stand around and point.
Yeah, I'd like to see a slouching figure. That would be nice, because I spent 20 years in the military. Trust me, my pockets were always full of stuff, and I was slouching a lot because I was tired.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's the quest. Make something a little bit more human.
Yeah, for sure. Where can people see your work? You know, where's the best place for people to look at your pieces?
Probably Instagram, purely because it's like your boys. You know, I struggle to fit sort of sometimes. As you say, I'm very sort of like non-genre. Don't make jets or anything like that. So I've got onto Facebook last year, courtesy of yourself. Joined your Plastic Posse, and
thank you. Yes,
but sometimes I don't know what to post on there. I don't, because it's not a huge figure one, is it? So I post most of my figure stuff on the small subjects page, but not as much as I probably should. So they're the main sites. I'm part of the Wingnut Wings builders group, obviously, because I just want to see other guys building Wingnut Wings ones. But apart from that, it's more or less Instagram. I've got 3 pages on there. For general builds, I've got GB scale models, which I haven't posted a lot on recently. I've got my figure painters, which is just my name, just on there. And then I've got one for our painting group, which is quite small. So, yeah, I probably put more stuff on there than anywhere else, but not as regularly as I should.
Appreciate that. If you guys haven't seen a lot of Gary's builds, as he mentioned, check out the small subjects page and also the Plastic Posse group. You can see a lot of his work there, including a lot of the builds that we've talked about today. And then go follow him on Instagram. You won't be sorry. Gary, I can't wait for MMSI. I'm dragging this guy here with me. And we're also dragging Aaron Cook, who's another friend of ours, and can't wait for him to meet you as well. It's going to be great. I understand we're going to be able to see a lot of Shep Payne's original works that are going to be on display. Yeah. So that's a great opportunity. But more than anything, just the things you've talked about with collaborating and, talking to Andy and Greg and all the amazing artists that are going to be there. It's going to be awesome. Well,
you're in exalted company when you go to places like that. It's great. You just put your stuff down and just just admire everyone else's work.
Yeah. You have to almost kind of pinch yourself sometimes having those conversations. I agree, and you get to meet great people like you. I mean, it was so much fun to meet you and shake your hand and have your piece right there, so that we could talk about it.
That's down to you. I just said to you, and I was glad to meet you boys, and it's the same with the small subjects. And if we ever meet the guys from SMC, and just like most of the podcasts, when you first get back into the hobby, you proved such a vital route of information alone, and then the people you've interviewed go down the rabbit holes, find out what they've done and stuff like that. It's fascinating. I mean, I used to say like Alex Clark. I mean, his stuff. I'm never going to build one. I'm never going to build 1/72. But I just love seeing what he does. Just love that sort of stuff. So, and I wouldn't have come across him probably unless you had him on the podcast. So, it's fair play to all you guys. You put the time in to put these things out there. You provided a great source of inspiration and information.
Well, thank you. And you inspire people as well. And that's the best part of this, is getting to talk to people like yourself that
they're on my payroll. Don't worry.
That's right. No, I mean, your work does inspire, and it gives people a chance to really, in some sense, collaborate and to hear your perspective and what works for you and what inspires you. There's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You know, if it does inspire someone, then it's great, isn't it? But so it's a solitary pursuit. So any sort of involvement we can get with other people is great. I just say, you hear so many stories as well, don't you? People struggling with their own mental side of it all. Touch wood, I've never had any problems with that. I work in an industry that's very, very different, and it's probably got people that are too confident in it most of the time and too gregarious. So, you know, my heart goes out to any of the people that, you know, struggle with any type of struggles they've got on there. I find that very fascinating to hear about, and you always think, you know, how can we help and motivate them? You know, just one little thing, you might just paint something and it just gives them a little kick.
Yeah.
And generally, a lot of the time, it's the silent majority. We don't know, do we? The ripple effect of what we do goes out. A lot of it you feel sometimes is unnoticed, but with social media, you never know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we, as you know, associate very heavily with Models for Heroes in the UK, and it's something we believe in. And, you know, Malcolm teaches us all the time that, you know, the power of sitting down with someone and painting a model kit can literally save people's lives. And that's an important part of the hobby. So I appreciate you.
No, it's definitely. So I'll go back to, when I first started, and I was, you know, this little 13-year-old, and I sat down with, I think it was Max Longhurst, who was a massive builder of Hysterex kits. And there was a massive exhibition in London at the time. It's called the Model Engineer Exhibition. Don't know if you ever heard of it. And it was over like a 2-3 day period. It was huge. It had every type of model conceivable. And I think he was in there doing a painting demo. And I think I sat by his desk for like 4 hours straight over 2 days each day, and just, you know, probably annoyed the hell out of him, but he never once showed it. And I could just sit there and watch him paint, listen, talk to other painters, and just got schooled on, you know, figure painting.
Wow, that's it. That's incredible. And obviously it's made a huge impact on you. So, well, Gary, thank you so much for your time this morning. And this has been too long in coming. Yep. We will see you in 2 weeks, and super excited to see what you bring to the show.
Yeah, we'll see you in that little cafe in the hotel, won't we? It's either I'll be buying you lunch or dinner or whatever, breakfast.
That sounds good. Cannot wait. You take care, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks, Gary. All right. So one more discussion, and I'm going to introduce it this time. It's actually a 2-part question. So just to make everybody feel safe, I will answer it the first time because Scott wrote it that way. So I will take a chance. But the question is, it's a 2-part question. What is the skill that you have been most working on in the past year to improve? That's the first question. And this is the second question. What is one thing you want to improve on as a modeler in the next year? So 2024, what do you want to improve on? So for me, 2023, what have I worked on a lot to improve this year? I have been really working on non-metallic metal for figures. Don't get me wrong, I like metals on figures, but I think you could bring out a little bit better with non-metallic metals. You know, it's kind of controversial because some people say if you look at non-metallic metals from a different angle, you don't really see that. Yes, no, maybe. But that's a thing that I have really been working on hard this last year to get better at is non-metallic metals. So basically, if you don't know what non-metallic metals are, it is basically taking 3 colors to make a gold, 3 colors to make a silver. It's not using metallic paints, but it's using colors to make it look metallic. So if you're going to do a gold, you use a really, really dark yellowish at first, a mid-tone yellow, and then like an ice, Vallejo ice color paint to hit your highlights and knowing where the light is showing. That's what I've been really working on. Have I been successful? Nah, I'm working on it. Let's just put it that way. It's a work in progress, which all of this is. What do I want to do in the next year? There's kind of 2 things. I really want to get better at showing highlights on my figures. So pick a point of where the sun is coming down and highlight that area only. That's what I'm really going to try and work on this next year, is finding my highlights, bringing up the highlights in my figures. I do a lot of darker stuff because I don't force light in a lot of my stuff. but I'm trying. But that's what I really want to work on. And the second thing I really want to work on is getting back into armor. I haven't been building armor or vehicles for a while, so I'd like to get back into one or two. I'm going to AMPS Nationals this year for one of the shows that I'm going to attend. So I'd need to have some kind of armor or vehicle there for that, for sure. Might be Warhammer armor, but it's still armor. That's what I plan on doing. So this year, NMM, non-metallic metal, and next year it's finding light and make sure my figures have light. And I'm going to reach over and go to Rick.
Well, hold on, Grant. Let's talk about this non-metallic metal. So what do you what have you learned, and what do you still feel like you need to learn on it? Just curious what your process has been like.
What have I learned? I've learned a lot more about the color wheel, which kind of sounds weird, but when you start playing with non-metallic metals, you figure out the color wheel. At least I have figured out shading in the color wheel and how it works into a better pattern than I did before. What colors go together? What's the best color to make gold? What's the best color to make whatever colors to make whatever color you're looking for, the metallic color? So that's what I've learned. That has definitely been a plus in my modeling. I think that I'm showing it a little bit more with the color reaches and stuff like that. One of the hard things I found out about it also is that you have to make a choice about where the light is coming from and where the reflections are coming from, because you can't paint it all in a bright light, if that makes sense. So you have to really rely on your shadows, and most of all, I think I rely mostly on midtones of my paints. I've done a vampire. It's called King of Skulls, which it's a figure, and it's basically it's a non-metallic metal, black and red, and using reds and grays to make silver armor. So it kind of sounds out of place, but it worked well, I think, on that figure. And that was basically finding the color and the color wheels to hit with the midtones. That's what I've learned. There's a lot of great books out there, a lot of great painters out there that are willing to help. When you look at people like Rick and you look at people like Mr. Sam Dwyer and all these other fantastic model builders and how they paint their stuff, and you try and simulate that. And I learned so much from these guys, and a lot of the figure painters are the same way. A lot of my stuff is Warhammer because I don't have a lot of room, so I kind of paint smaller stuff. And I'm learning a lot from the European modelers, the so-called Spanish styles. There's a lot of British guys out there that have fantastic non-metallic metal skills that I'm trying to learn from, and in the States too. So that's what I've learned so far this year.
So is non-metallic metal, it sounds like it's really linked at the hip with OSL as well. Mm-hmm. The lighting and the orientation of the lighting seems to be a real key component of that technique.
Right. And that's what I got to work on my OSL lighting this year, is that I want to work on is trying to push that extra light color to bring up the non-metallic metal. If I would have done this right, I think I would have gone with OSL first and then the non-metallic later. I kind of went the back way in. It's just what it is. Finding that light is the important thing for non-metallic metal. For me, it's actually helped me a little bit going backwards, because if I paint the non-metallic metal with the light on it, I can actually find my OSL. So I can go back up and, okay, this is where I want the light to come from. Backwards, yes, but it shouldn't be that way. That's what I've learned. All right. So I've wasted a lot of time here talking about colors. I am going to move to Rick. What do you worked on this year, and what do you want to work on next year?
Well, first, I admire you for your non-metallic and OSL strivings. Those are two nuts to crack that I'm far from. I've tried it a few times. Those are difficult. I'm going to step back a little bit. What I've been working on this year, trying to make a concentrated effort, was just getting to be a better figure painter in general. I'm basically a diorama vignette builder when I'm not having a midlife crisis, and the figures do so much to be able to tell that story. And I'm always feeling like I'm letting the story down and the scene down, because my figures are secondary or second rate as compared to what, say, the armor or the scene itself is. So spent a lot of time painting figures this year. I've made improvement, I believe. Still have a long ways to go. What's coming up this year? Well, speaking of that midlife crisis, I am enjoying this whole idea of moving on to other genres outside of armor. And it really became evident when I did the buddy build with Josh on that ZGOC. And now it's continuing as I've gone into a few other things, including Warhammer and stuff, such like that. Is I've realized I've kind of closed myself in on my techniques and my tools and the paints I use, the mediums I use, oil paints in particular, things like that, to a very narrow scope, and everything starts to feel the same. And as I broadened out my subjects, I'm finding that I need to even broaden out techniques and materials and things like that. So I'm making kind of almost like revisiting the hobby in almost a innocent sort of way, is not just running right straight back to where I'm comfortable or what I've always done, but looking around on the shelves now and trying to figure out other solutions on how to do things that might be more appropriate or offer something unique or something different than what I'm generally used to. So I'm kind of in an exploratory move. I'm being a little Jacques Cousteau here and trying to figure out the depths of my modeling intrigues or whatever.
I really like some of like you did the base with the lava, and some of the tones and the colors that you used in your science fiction facade. I guess it's okay to call it that, hopefully, but it seems like you are taking more chances with contrast and color. Is that fair? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and that comes from the change in genres too, because when I approach armor, I tend to be more of a realistic. I don't try to force the light. The modulation stuff isn't really where my aesthetics tend to want to lie. But moving on to these categories outside of that, now I feel like I have that hall pass. I could start to try to figure out other things in order to push those boundaries, go into OSL or non-metallics and things like that, because, well, they're appropriate and there's really no rules. But it means at the same time that I'm having to learn all these different skill sets and get out of my, like we say, a comfort zone, trying different materials, different paints, that kind of things. And I'm really enjoying it. That's, we've talked about in the past on the posse here about your mojo and losing your mojo and how to get it back. And this is, I think, part of that same conversation, at least for me, is just to kind of push here and there, just to kind of make sure that when I wake up in the morning, I'm still excited about the hobby and want to get to the bench.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. That excitement, that change is always it always grabs you and pulls you to it. And you said some things in there that were really, really kind of grabbed me. And you talked about, with how you kind of been given a free license with the sci-fi stuff to do with the colors you want and stuff, and changes like that. And that's, people need to understand, is that it is great to reach out sometimes and try a different thing and have fun with it. So it's really a good answer, Rick. I really do appreciate that. Jim, what about you?
Well, I have spent the last couple of years going to night school to try to learn my weathering and dusting and all this stuff on armor. I'm not sure that I am anywhere where I want to be on that topic. I think what I deal with, and maybe this is going a little too existential for the question, but I'm still struggling with a lot of fear of doing things on a model and screwing up the model. And I think I need to get over that, because and this sort of goes into what I'm trying to do for next year, is I really struggle contextualizing or kind of having the vision with armor of what I want to do. And I'll use an example. So I was up in Calgary at the military museum or the regiments. I'm not sure what it's called. And there's this T-34 sitting outside that is just rusted to all get up, and absolutely love it. Was all excited to come home and do it. But what really took me back is at one point I had video chatted with Eric Brubaker, Rick, and I think JC. And Rick's pointing out, do you notice that it's faded differently on either side? Did you notice this? And I'm like, these aren't even things I saw. I just saw a rusted tank. So I'm kind of looking at how to better contextualize or kind of have a vision of where I want to go. Related to that is Eric has been on my case of, like, I was coming home and I'm thinking I want to try to do this in 72 or 48. And both Eric Brubaker and another local friend, Mike Millette, were saying, well, Jim, you're never going to achieve your vision. Step up to 135. And I have spent most of my hobby time playing with small things. And 135 seems very large to me. But doing this Sherman, I see what their point is you can better kind of create your vision on a larger canvas. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at next year, is how do I have better vision of what I want to do? And I'm even seeing this with the facade. Like, I've got this basic idea, but I don't want to cut foam until I know exactly what I want to do. And I was sending Scott some messages of, let's talk about rock and roll and what we can do with bricks and kind of different things there. And I think I now have an idea of what I want to do, but it's always hard for me to have the vision or the artistic thing. I'm not an engineer, but sometimes I wonder if being a lawyer, I'm very used to, argument and results and logic. And I don't think that flows really well into scale modeling because I'm lacking. Like when I hear, Grant, when you talk about the color wheel, nothing scares me more than the color wheel. Like, is that something I put over my wheel on my car? Like, I really don't even know what that is. So it's hard for me sometimes to contextualize or have a vision. And that's what I want to work on next year, is not just I'm building a model, I'm trying to create a piece. And related to that, the other thing more hands-on is I want to do more bases. Apparently, hanging out with Scott Gentry and Rick Lawler and watching too much Night Shift, you just end up wanting to make bases. So I've got a lot of pink foam and I want to turn those into other things. But yeah, just getting outside my head instead of what I kind of call what I do recreating. I'm recreating an item in a photograph. I want to be more creative and create scenes instead of just, here's the airplane or here's the tank on a plank.
I have the Emperor's voice in my head right now from Star Wars. Good, Jim. He's more in armor every day, right? I mean, more an armor builder every day.
I have turned to the dark side, but I'm going to try to use my powers for good. I don't know what that means, but hey.
There is no good in armor building. It's all for the evil.
You are the Anakin Skywalker in this story.
That's okay. I'm the Jar Jar Binks. Don't worry about it. All right. So let's go over to Josh. Josh, what have you been working on this year, and what do you want to improve on next year?
Well, I was actually really glad to see this question because it was something I actually done. So it was great to have something good to talk about. I wanted to really work on this past year's my brush painting skills. A lot of it revolves around what people have already talked about was figures. I like to build airplanes and I never build the pilots because it ends up looking like something from a Muppet movie. So, so I wanted to just practice. So no specific techniques or anything like that, just paint more figures, work on it. And so I have been working on it. There's a little sci-fi one I've been working on. It's been going well. I've really enjoyed it. It was good to pick a goal and make myself work on it. And this next go around, I want to be a little bit more specific on my armor and aircraft and even sci-fi stuff. I want to work on my weathering techniques. Specifically, exhaust staining is something I've always really struggled with. Getting exhaust stains that I really like. I've tried lots of different techniques, but it's something I really want to focus on and make myself figure out something that works for me. So I think that will be the next step is exhaust staining parts of the weathering process.
Is that exhaust staining going to be on aircraft and vehicles or either or both?
Yeah, both.
Okay.
So, yeah, the exhaust staining going down the side of the fuselage of an aircraft.
Right.
And then, soot deposits on the back of mufflers and things like that. So yeah, it's just something I've struggled with. It doesn't look the way I kind of envision it or want it to. And it's not going to get better if I don't try to work on it. Yeah,
that's you're 100% correct there. It's just got to take the time and, sit down and do it. And, that's great. Your figure painting this year has been fantastic. You're advancing in leaps and bounds. Let's just say that. And you're doing such a good job of bringing that stuff to life. And that's great to see and need to see, can't wait to see more. And I know Scott feels the same way and what we've seen.
Yeah, there's a couple things that, I really look up to Josh for. First of all, his storytelling is terrific. On his power suit that he did from Fallout 4, he put a little butterfly on the finger of a guy in a great big power suit. And it just, there's other elements too, but his storytelling is something that Rick is also somebody who's really, really good at that. I really admire that. And then Josh is also way, way better than me at planning and keeping notes on projects. That's a skill I really aspire to. I think it really would help my own projects if I was a lot more like him in that way. And so it's something I watch and try to learn from, certainly as we work together.
All right, Zach, your turn. What's up?
So this is going to sound very similar to what pretty much everybody else has said. In the past year, I've been working a whole lot on, kind of accidentally, honestly, on like my figure work, which is something I've wanted to really try and sit down and work on for a long time because I really like figures. I think they're a really fun thing to do. I've just never been any good at them, which always, pushes you into like, well, I'm not good at it, so I'm just not going to do it. With my little tractor vignette that I started and finished earlier this year, that was like my first real attempt at painting a figure in probably like 5 years. It had been a really long time since before. So obviously, as everybody else in the world does now, I copied Night Shift's techniques So I did, the zenithal lighting, and then you do your glazes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and how'd that work out for you there, Zach?
The figure didn't win it. Technically, the whole thing did take best vignette at AMS Nationals.
Yeah, that's first figure in 5 years. Yeah, okay, yeah, whatever. Mm-hmm.
I don't think that was because of the figure, but
I think it helped.
I can't recall who was judging.
Yeah,
it wasn't me, right, guys? No, but so figures have been something that I've been trying to work on. And then at IPMS Nationals, I was at Rick's little seminar for doing bases, and I made this like the jungle base. So I guess kind of in a way, the two things I've really worked on this year have been my basing and my figures sort of in like at the same time. So I finished that little base, or mostly finished it, and then came home, worked on it a little bit more. I was like, yeah, I want to paint a figure. So I bought a Marine figure, which is really nice. It's an Andrea figure, I believe, at Nats for that base. And due to some kind of stupid moves on my part, it ended up having to be stripped, and I haven't gotten back to it because it was a pain to build. There's lots of these little gun straps and stuff that I didn't want to deal with a second time. So I haven't got back to that, but I will. But that honestly, that kind of pulls into what I want to work on in like the upcoming year, is just to continue to push into improving my basing, which I think is pretty decent. Like I'm all right at doing groundwork. My best is definitely that thing I worked on with Rick, because it's like a South Pacific kind of jungle vibe, which is something I'd wanted to build for a long time. And he just, in the incredible, the amazing blue bowl of good stuff, there was just this really funky looking stick that had like this kind of bend to it. And the second I saw that, I'm like, I know exactly what I want to do with this, because it looks just like this perfect jungle tree, because, they're always weird. So it's very green, very lush. And that's something I wanted to work on, because for the most part, all my basing had been kind of dry. Like my tractor vignette is set in loosely Italy. So, it's very dry, very arid, very Mediterranean. And then I went a whole 180 and decided to do a South Pacific jungle island. And I just want to keep pushing into that and to improve it, because it's something I really enjoy. I love doing groundwork. I love doing basing. And now I have found that I actually do, when I know what I'm doing a little better, enjoy figures quite a lot. The thing I really need to work on with my figures is my faces, which is obviously pretty much the hardest part of figure painting. So if I can sort of nail down being able to do faces consistently, because I can get a decent face eventually. On the guy on the tractor vignette, I painted his face, I think 12 times. And so in that 12 times, just through having done it so much, I got something that was eventually okay. But I would like to be able to do that in like 2 times, not 12.
Yeah.
So yeah, just pretty much apparently what everybody is working on, figures and basing.
Yeah, that's great though. I mean, yeah, first figure, 5 years,
I feel like night shift when I say that, like, oh yes, I have not done a figure in 27 years. This is a beautiful masterpiece.
Well, it was. You did a great job, and I can't wait to see more. You've got that base you made at Nationals in Rick's class was, and when you brought it to the table, I was like, damn. And I was like, was that 4 hours?
I am pretty proud of that. And that's not something you'll hear me say very often. I'm very proud with that.
I was going to say, what was so great is Zach was literally at my left hand. So he's on my left side there. We're sitting at the corner of the table here. And I'm just watching this little thing come together. And, that was all Zach. I don't think I gave him very much input at all. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong there, Zach, other than the blue bowl of good stuff was laid out on the table. He just started putting things together and putting things together and putting things together. And it was, as so often happens, this is why I like doing bases myself, is just there's kind of a magic that starts to happen someplace in the middle of it where it starts to come together and new ideas kind of prosper. And Zach's piece, that little Pacific piece that he put together, is a perfect example of that. So kudos to you, Zach. It's a great piece. And I can't wait to see your Marine finally get on top of it eventually.
One day. But yeah, I like what you said there, because that is what makes, especially doing groundwork and bases, so fun. It's a very free flow for the most part, unless you're, like strictly replicating a photograph like Sam Dwyer with his Panther. But unless you're doing that, it is a very free flow, very, let's just see where the foam takes us pretty much. Kind of thing. And I really enjoy just being able to have that creativity and not being worried about, oh, well, is this rock accurate to the place where the stick is? No, it's just, I want to put a rock there, so a rock goes there. Or I want to put a tree here, so a tree goes here.
Yeah, exactly.
Just some great work, great answers by all of you. But let's go to Scott. Scott, what do you been working on this year, and what do you want to improve for next?
I think I'm going to mostly continue on with the theme. So my 2023 has been primarily spent on improving two skills. First is 3D printing and, getting subjects off of my printer that are the quality that I really want. And that's taken a lot of work, and I feel pretty good about where that's going. And the second is basing and presentation. And again, Rick's seminar in San Marcos was very, very helpful and everything. And I feel like, I guess maybe as far as basing what I've learned this year is when I look at a project now, I just look at it differently. When I see a tank or a motorcycle or a spaceship or whatever it is, a base or the way that I present it is now part of my planning. I have a Panzer I in 1/16 scale that is completely built, but I haven't proceeded with painting yet because I haven't solved kind of what the basing scenario that I want to do with it is going to be. And so that to me has become really, really important. And, it's this group right here, Rick and Grant, who speaks that language really, really well. Josh, Zach, you guys, you guys all influence me, and it's just kind of gotten to the point where I'm no longer happy with that, little vehicle on a piece of paper on the table. I want something more. And as far as what I want to do moving forward, we talked a little bit a minute ago about storytelling and, what I admire about, again, this group and your work and everything is the ability to tell a story with your work. And, Zach, even before you were kind of doing vignettes and dioramas, you go back to the Brumbar, which is one of the first builds that you and I kind of became friends over as you were working on that. And, the way you approach that, I gave you a lot of grief along the way because you took a beautiful Tamiya kit and, butchered it and then rebuilt it little by little. But the way that model turned out with regards to storytelling, and Rick is also really good at this. Adam Wilder, where, Josh with the butterfly on the power suit and the way that he bases and presents his work. My Y-Wing that I did in this past year happened with Josh because we were working together while he was working on the power suit. I was working on my Y-Wing and not only did he help me make the base, but watching him tell a story was really inspiring as I was creating my own work, even though the subjects aren't really related in any way. And so hopefully in 2024, I can work on my storytelling and presentation. That's really what I want to focus on.
That's great, Scott. I think we're all kind of in the same boat a little bit where we want to improve, the storytelling and what we want to see for the future. And, there's so many things out there that you said some great things about, getting to that. You build a model, you don't see it the same way you did before. Now you see the base and the model together, which is the way I'm starting to see things too myself. I don't want to put them on just a plinth and say, hey, here we go. But I want to put something around them. And that's, I find that very interesting and very fun to take that step. All right. Well, I appreciate all the answers, guys. And like always, everybody out there, and what skills did you work on this year? And what do you want to improve for next year? So I want to see some answers. Let's hit every brand. Let's hit car modelers. Let's hit armor models. Let's hit plane models. Let's hit everybody. So what did you do this year? And what do you want to improve on next year? So let's reach out, everybody. All right.
It's that time, everyone. If you would like to rep the posse, you can check out all the awesome merch over on the Triple P Spring page. You can find coffee mugs, t-shirts, jumpers, or even some of the world-famous Triple P lounge trousers. Quick note, I know a lot of you have been asking. I checked. They still are not available yet, but should be coming soon, are the Triple B briefs. You can order all of your stylish Plastic Posse merch on the web at plastic-posse-podcast.creator-spring.com or the much simpler loungetrousers.com.
Well, can you believe it? They're letting me read something here on the Plastic Posse. Let's see if I can get through this. Thanks for riding along with us for episode number 80 of the Plastic Posse. Your support, along with our great sponsors and patrons, well, you help bring the PPP to you every 2 weeks. Can you believe that? Every 2 weeks. Got a gripe? Take it elsewhere. Maybe a suggestion? Perhaps we'll listen. You can send us your feedback to plasticpossepodcast@gmail.com. See you in 2 weeks. And I can't do this yeehaw thing because my voice just won't take it. So yeehaw in a subtle way.
Nice. I like it, man.
I like it, man.
There's no wrong way to yeehaw. If you would like to support the Triple P and become a Plastic Posse Outrider, it's super easy. Just go on over to our Patreon page. It's www.patreon.com/Plastic Posse Podcast. You can set up a recurring donation there. These contributions really help us offset the cost of bringing you the Triple P. There's 3 different tiers of support available, and they start at just $1 a month. There's some great benefits for you as well. You get early access to our podcasts, premium access to the hosts, the chance to appear on a podcast, and other exclusive Triple P content.
And let's recognize our amazing deputy marshals. These guys really step up and help the posse do what we do, and we sincerely thank them for their support. Casey Gray, Noggin the Nog, Brad Ralston, Stephen Rodwell, Rick Cooper, Tim Gidcombe, Dan Newman, Robert Blocker, Tyler Moore, Derek Post, Craig Flynn, Brian Kreiner, Scale Modelcraft, Ken Childress, Nick Butta, Drew Gardner, Scott Hall, Frank Perrone, The Voice of Bob, Jeremy Diamond, Ryan Smith, Terry Wilkinson, Chris Lovewell, Andrew Callis, Ethan Eidenmill, Bruce the Model Noob, Steve Baker, Eric Daglish, Joe Porche, Patrick Brown, Jay Kidd, Brandon Gentry, Robert Klein, Mark Ewing, Ted Kawahara, Toadman, Model Doc, Doug Reed, Greg James, Les Wicala, B. Colt 1911, John Everett, Josh Buck, Thomas Vanek, Mark Bradley, Zach Pease, Joel Munson, Eric Brubaker, Jeremy Moore, DB Scale Model Studio, Matt Johnston, Jeremy Elliott, Mike Tiley, Previous Seat, Mediocre Middle-Aged Modeler, Dan Knopfel, and JC Osborne.
Let's also recognize our excellent posse foremen. These foremen are outriders who give the deputy marshals a hand. Steve, William, Rob, Tim, Jeff, Eddie, Ross, George, Gary, Warhoff Models, Drew, Ross, Eric, Len, Cliff, Eric again, Mike, Papa Steve, Red Beach One Studios, MD Models, JV, my personal hero, Damien, Karen, Cody, Sunkissed, Nukeman Mike, Greg, JAK, Ash, Irish Pat, Paul, What's the Deal with iBones Models, Mr. Grizz, hey, I know that guy, Jackson, MAK Armor, Chris, Lee, and Jamie.
And of course, our Posse Outriders. We appreciate all of you, including our newest Outrider, Chris Doppler. Thanks, Chris, and welcome to the Posse. Please consider posting a review of the Triple P on the podcast platform you use. Each 5-star review helps other modelers find the Plastic Posse, and see y'all soon.
Well, thanks, guys.
That was great,
hopefully
guys.
that wasn't too painful. Appreciate y'all being here.
So I have a question because I constantly talk about music. Lenny Kravitz dropped a new song called TK421, and I'm trying to figure out, why is Lenny Kravitz singing about a stormtrooper? Or is there another meaning to TK421?
Which one's Lenny Kravitz?
Oh.
You and Josh both.
Yeah, these kids with their music, man.
I know.
Man, I need to check that out. Lenny hasn't made anything in a while. So.
Yeah, it's pretty funky. It sounds like Prince, but I'm still trying to, like, it's got nothing to do with stormtroopers. There must be another meaning, and I'm just trying to figure out what it could be.
Probably a lawsuit that he got out of.
Yeah, there you go. I'm sure he'll be getting a cease and desist from Disney any minute now.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I'm waiting for one of those for my Skywalker comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, here, no.
Judas Priest dropped a new single this week too. It's pretty good. If you,
Yeah.
I mean, if you
It's
like
interesting.
that sort of thing, I
Yeah.
like it.
It's
I was
kind
gonna
of
say,
slick.
Rick, you probably like it.
Yeah, I
so.
like it. It's kind of slick, a little, I don't know, maybe a little overproduced. I don't know, but it's got that chug, 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 chug thing going on there.
Mhm.
And
I like chug, 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 chug.
no, I
Really?
like it too, but it's a little metallic not
Ooh, I like
not-
that.
not gritty
I think it had a little bit of a turbo vibe. You know, they had a little bit of some keys, and it sounds like they
Yeah.
were guitar actuated keys, like they did on the Turbo album. And I think that has kind of a cool sound to bring that back. you know,
Yeah,
at
it's
this
also
point.
cool that actually, Glenn Tipton is playing guitars on it too, because
Yep.
I know he's struggling, of course. But,
Yeah.
Yeah,
so it's nice that he was able to record.
I really liked their last album. Did you like Firepower?
Yeah, I did. Have you heard Richie Faulkner's God, what's the name of their album? His solo album?
No, but I'm
I didn't-
definitely interested.
Didn't know that.
It's a band name. Something, hang on here.
That'd be a good name for a band. Something.
Damn it.
That's exactly what they are. I know. Well,
God
when you're
damn
trying
it,
to-
times three.
Elegant Weapons
All
is the
right,
name of
I'm
the name of the
checking that
band.
out.
Check them out because it's got it's basically an all-star band. It's got what's his face from Pantera playing bass, but they
Oh.
use somebody different to go on the road. But that is a better Judas Priest album than what at least the first single off of Judas Priest is. So it's really, really
yeah.
good.
Yeah, definitely have to check that out.
Yeah,
Josh, have you heard the new song?
No, and I've got like 2 rows of Judas Priest on my CD rack, so I'm maybe checking that out.
Yeah, it's called Panic Attack. So
I am currently 1 minute and 23 seconds into it. It's quite nice.
Oh.
Yeah, you like it?
Very
There you
cool.
go. You know,
I do
check
like
out
the
Elegant
keys.
Weapons. Yeah, check out Elegant Weapons too if you like this.
I don't know if anybody's interested, but I am going to see Guns N' Roses November 2nd at the Hollywood Bowl down here.
wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I haven't seen them since the early 90s. So it'd be
Is
interesting.
Alice in Chains opening up, or who's the opener? Do you know?
I don't think it's Alice in Chains. I have to look at my tickets, but
No, Alice wraps up their tour in your neck of the woods, either Spokane or maybe Spokane tonight or tomorrow. And then
Scott likes to send me all these videos of Axel's vocals and how he sounds like Mickey Mouse now.
he does. He really does.
A little bit different.
Send me
from,
one.
like,
I
the
got
80s.
to see them, and Alice opened up. I got to see them when they started this whole debacle at wherever the Seahawks play. I don't know what it's
Mhm.
called. And Axel could still sing, and they played for a long time. It was a good show. Like,
Yeah.
it's missing Izzy because Izzy
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses,
Yeah.
but otherwise, it was cool to see Guns N' Roses
Yeah.
at a huge stadium with a ton of other people.
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask, is the first act him trying to put on his leather pants?
That's not pretty. That's not pretty for anybody above 30. Okay.
That's right.
No, but there's an image coming back from a Friday night watching John Gray play. Jim knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not talking about that at all.
Josh doesn't know it, but we're going to go catch Mammoth. They're coming back again to Utah to the depot in November. And his new album is really, really good. And he plays great live. He definitely got a lot of talent from Dad. So
That's cool.
he's Mammoth is a good band. So
That's
Yeah,
cool.
So
Scott,
what
I
do you
scored
guys-
tickets to see the Mule on Friday, so I'm taking Claren to see Government Mule in February. I'm really excited.
Have any of you heard Sleep Token?
Mm-mm.
I've recently, on my way back from DC, I listened to like almost their entire discography on the way down.
Yeah,
I'm a
it's
fan.
good. I
pretty good,
did-
huh?
someone told me about them like 3 weeks ago. I think it was at Orange Con, and they just, hey, you need to listen to these guys. And I was like, okay, cool. I tried.
I don't
It's really good.
I don't know what genre you'd put them in.
I don't either.
I think that
But-
they're just their own thing.
Yeah, it's
That-
just different.
have you heard of like the 1975?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so if you listen to them, Their music is it's pretty good. It's but if you listen to them and then listen to Sleep Token, they're just like the same band, but one has distortion.
Oh, okay.
I find that very funny.
Last show I went to a couple weeks ago was 3 Days Grace and Chevelle. So shout out to the voice of Bob, because I know he went, I think it was last night, to see the same show. It had just made its way over to North Carolina, but Chevelle's a really good band. If you like Tool, you'd like Chevelle. Yeah,
they've been around for a long time.
Yeah, good band. Not as much into 3 Days Grace, but Chevelle's pretty awesome.
I actually followed Chevelle after they did their first album. That would have been like early 2000s.
Yeah,
I've followed Chevelle for a long time. I like them a lot.
Okay, so here's my. You never think I was going to recommend these guys to you, these gals to you. Have you heard of The Warning?
That sounds familiar.
Okay, they're three girls. They play hard rock, verging on metal. They're from. I want to say that they're from Mexico. At least a couple of them are. I think the drummer might be from Canada.
They're from Mexico.
Yeah. They have a video on YouTube. I highly recommend you watch it. The energy from these girls, and especially the drummer. Watch the drummer. Full concert live at Teatro Metropolis, something like that. Metropolitan. Damn good video. It made me a convert. These girls can rock. They are good, and they have so much stage presence on this video. So I've been getting into them quite a bit, just kind of following what they've been doing. And I guess they did the Video Music Awards. They played 2 songs there at the MTV Awards about a month ago. And they did both songs in one take, and no one could believe them, because usually they have to do take after take after take, and they just tore it up. So they're very good.
Rick, check out a Japanese all-female metal band called Bandmade. It's their hard rock heavy metal, and we saw them. We saw them live, and they have a bass player who's pretty special. She's, they're all pretty good at what they do, but this bass player they have, I've seen some of the best bass players ever, and she's pretty special. She's really good.
That's cool. Yeah, I've heard of them. I haven't really listened to them, so I'll do that. I'm pulling up on the screen here all these guys you're recommending, so I've got like all my tabs open. So as I go back to my Luna over here after we're done, I now have a playlist for the afternoon.
Wow, The Warning Disciple is really good.
I'm going to put Scott on the spot here and go back to old guy music. Did you listen to the Stones single I sent you?
I did. I was actually, I guess it was better than I thought it was going to be.
I couldn't believe it. I thought it was actually good. And it had Lady Gaga in it. And I thought it was just like when I first, the Stones are doing a song with Lady Gaga. I'm like, this is gonna suck. And I was pleasantly, really impressed.
She's pretty talented. She's not my thing normally, but I've seen a couple of videos of her singing with Metallica. She's did a couple shows with them and sang some songs with them, and she's pretty talented. She seems to be pretty comfortable no matter what kind of music that she's playing. But yeah, it was a good song.
I was just impressed that she wasn't really in the song. It was more background vocals, and to be a big star and kind of lay back is kind of cool. And I think it kind of a little bit had that Exile sound, only it wasn't nearly sludgy enough. But
yeah,
I thought it was cool.
A little cleaner and polished. But yeah, I can see where that's coming from. I've been playing the heck out of my Steven Wilson remaster of Who's Next, which is, top 5 rock album of all time. Come on. It's a unbelievable album, and it sounds amazing now.
Have you ever got Richard Wright?
No, I still don't have it. Still waiting. I need to follow up on that. Appreciate the reminder. I'm also waiting on Steven Wilson's new solo album on Blu-ray. It's supposed to be here any day. What was that,
Scott? When does the PPP do their music show? Is that like the alternate weeks here?
Scott and I have often talked about doing a music show.
Yeah. We have. But he's an attorney. He's always busy. I'm always, trying to get a hold of him. So